I didn't want to do Firewatch anymore. That's the part I don't say out loud, because it sounds soft. Like I'm complaining about a job 100 people would kill for. Alone in a tower, paid to look at trees and sunsets. Peaceful shift, easy overtime. People love the idea of it. The reality is, the quiet gets inside you. Not the nice kind of quiet. The kind that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. The kind that makes every small sound feel like a question. By my third season, I started doing little things just to prove I still existed. Talking to myself, leaving the radio on low even when dispatch wasn't calling, walking the catwalk around the cabin every hour, and checking the same bolts I checked an hour before. So, when the district offered me a transfer to a different tower, new forest, new coverage area, fresh start, I said yes way too fast. Anything to get out of the habit loop. They didn't frame it as a favor either. They called it temporary coverage, staffing shortage, too many people out sick, a couple out on injury, and one tower position sitting open because nobody wanted the assignment after the last guy left early. That's how they put it in the email. No details. Just an empty line where the explanation should have been. They called it Tower 12 on the paperwork. Out there, it was just a skinny shape on a ridge, stuck above the tree line like a cigarette burning down. I drove in late morning with the gear rattling in the back of my truck. Duffel, cooler, a cheap camp chair, the issued radio, and a paper map that looked like it was printed before smartphones existed. When you start Firewatch, there's a script they give you. The basics. Don't go off trail. Don't hike alone. Don't engage unknown hikers. Report anything suspicious. Trust your training. They don't have a section for how to not lose your mind when you're the only human voice you hear for days. That's what I was trying to outrun. The tower was accessed by a service road that turned into a dirt track, that turned into something you'd only call a road if you were being generous. The last half mile, I could feel every rock through the tires. Pines leaned in. The world narrowed. The tower itself had a small cabin at the base, more like a tool shed with a bed, and stairs that climbed into the sky. The top platform boxed in by windows on all four sides. A tiny lighthouse in a sea of green. There was no one waiting for me. No handoff ranger, no welcome. Just a note clipped to the inside of the cabin door. Keys under the mug. Generator tested. Water in tank. Radio check-in at 1800. D. I unlocked the cabin, dropped my stuff, and stood in the doorway, listening. Nothing moved except the trees. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like being set down in an empty room and realizing the door had quietly clicked shut behind you. I did the routine. Inventory, radio check, generator, firefinder in the tower, still leveled, binoculars in the drawer, logs in a binder with a pen attached by string like a bank chain. Then, because I've always been the kind of person who fills silence with action, I went for a walk. It wasn't even a real hike. More like stretching my legs, getting a feel for the area. The tower sat on a ridge, with a loop trail that circled through the high timber before dropping down into lower, denser woods. I told myself I'd go a mile out and come back. I made it about 15 minutes before I saw the first piece of clothing. a hoodie, gray, damp at the cuffs, snagged on a low branch like it had been thrown up there. The fabric was stretched at the shoulders, as if someone had grabbed it hard. I stopped and stared. My first thought was litter. Tourists, teenagers. People leave junk everywhere. Then I looked closer and saw it wasn't old. It wasn't sun-bleached. It wasn't torn by time. It looked recently placed, like it still remembered the shape of a body. I stepped toward it and checked the ground around the tree. No footprints I could make out. The soil was dry and packed. Pine needles hit everything. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to. I took a mental note of the location and kept walking. 200 yards later, there was a sneaker. One. Just one. It sat on the trail like someone had set it down carefully. Toe pointed downhill, laces still tied. That's when my stomach tightened. People lose shoes in a hurry. Shoes don't just fall off. Not unless something is wrong. I kept moving, telling myself I'd mark it and report it later when I had more information. That rational voice lasted until I found the shirt. It was a white button-up, the kind someone wears to an office. It was draped across a boulder just off the trail, sleeves hanging down like arms. The buttons were missing. Not ripped. Missing. As if someone had popped them off in a panic. I felt the hair on my arms rise. I looked around, scanning between the trees. And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw movement far back in the timber. Not an animal darting. Not a bird. Something tall shifting its weight, like it had been standing there a while and got tired of holding still. When I focused, there was nothing. Just trunks and shadow. My brain tried to dismiss it. My body didn't. I turned back the way I came. Then I heard the scream. It was distant, but clear enough that my body reacted before my mind did. High, sharp, and human. A woman, maybe? The kind of scream that isn't surprise, but fear. Sustained, ragged at the end, like someone's throat had already been screaming for a while. I froze. The woods went still in a way that felt wrong. Even the birds shut up, like they were listening too. I waited for a second scream. It didn't come. I started moving anyway, fast but controlled, moving the direction the sound seemed to come from. That's another stupid instinct. Run toward trouble because maybe you can help. Because that's what rangers do. Because you don't want to be the person who heard a scream and walked away. The trail dipped and twisted. Trees thickened. The air smelled wetter down here. More earth than pine. I pushed through brush and kept listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No sobs. No muffled shouting. Just my own breathing and the soft crunch of needles. I stopped and listened again, holding my breath until my lungs burned. Silence. I pulled my radio off my belt and brought it to my mouth. Dispatch? This is Tower 12. Copy? Static hissed back. Then a click. Tower 12, go ahead. Hearing a human voice should have calmed me. It didn't. I heard a scream, I said. Possible hiker distress. I'm on the loop trail, headed south-southeast of the tower. I'm also seeing scattered clothing along the path. Requesting guidance. Possibly send a unit. There was a pause. Not the kind where someone's thinking. The kind where the line feels open and empty, like your words went into a hallway and didn't echo. Then, dispatch said, "Copy, Tower 12. Can you confirm location?" "I can give coordinates in a minute." "Negative," dispatch said. "Return to the tower." That snapped my attention. "Repeat?" "Return to the tower," dispatch said again. Same tone, too flat. "Do not leave the trail. Do not approach voices." I stared at the radio. Rangers aren't supposed to tell you, "Don't approach voices." We're supposed to tell you to stay safe, yes. But if you hear someone screaming, you respond or you call for backup. That's the job. "Is there an active incident in the area?" I asked. "Any missing persons? Anything I should know?" Another pause. Then, "Return to the tower." No explanation. My throat went dry. "Dispatch, identify." The radio hissed. Then the voice came back, a little quieter, like it leaned closer to the microphone. "Return, before the light goes." I clicked off transmit and stared at the trees. That was wrong. That was not normal procedure. That was not dispatch talk. I turned back toward the tower, and that's when I saw it. Not at first. Not like a clear shape. Just a wrongness between two trunks about 20 yards off the trail. The way the shadows looked heavier in one spot. The way my eyes kept sliding to it even when I tried to focus elsewhere. I stopped slowly and looked directly at it. Two eyes caught the light. Not reflective like a deer. Not wide like an owl. Flat, set forward, watching like a person watches. I stood there too long, trying to tell myself it was a bear, a big cat, a hiker crouched down, being weird. Then, it leaned forward slightly, enough for me to see more of it. It was tall, too tall for the way it moved. Its shoulders rose and fell like it was breathing slow, controlled. The head was wrong, elongated, and the neck seemed to fold in on itself, like it didn't have the right joints. And it didn't blink. That's what got me. That steady, unbroken stare. Like it didn't need to blink because it wasn't a living thing the way I understood living things. Like blinking was a habit for creatures that get tired. We locked eyes, and it held my gaze like it was doing something with it. Like it was waiting for something to change in my face. I tried to look away and couldn't. My body felt pinned by that stare. My hands started sweating so much, my grip on the radio slipped. The air around it looked wrong, too. Subtle, but wrong. Like the space near its body was slightly out of focus. Like heat haze over asphalt, even though the day was cool. Then, without warning, the thing's mouth opened. It didn't roar. It screeched. A sound so sharp and raw, it cut through me like wire. It started high, broke into a wet, rattling trill, then dropped into a low, vibrating growl that I felt in my teeth. The woods didn't just go silent. They felt like they recoiled. The thing snapped its head to the side, as if listening to something I couldn't hear, and then it moved. It didn't run like an animal. It moved like it knew exactly where the ground was without looking, stepping between roots without hesitation, gliding from tree to tree. And then, it was gone. I stood there shaking, half expecting it to swing back around and charge me. It didn't. That made it worse. Because if it wanted me, it could have taken me right then. Instead, it felt like it had made a decision. I started walking fast toward the tower. Not running, because running makes noise, and noise in the woods is like bleeding in water. I kept my head on a swivel, scanning left and right, trying to catch movement. Every snapped twig made my shoulders jump. Every snapped twig made my shoulders jump. Every gust of wind sounded like someone whispering my name in a voice that almost fit. As I got closer to the ridge, the trees thinned slightly, and I could see higher sky through the canopy. The light was changing. The afternoon was tilting toward evening. Shadows stretched longer, and the world started to cool. I told myself, get back, lock up, call in, wait for backup. Then, I heard someone trying to get my attention. Hey! It came from my right, close enough that I flinched. A man's voice. Normal volume, like someone calling you from across a room. I froze mid-step. The voice called again, a little further away now. Hey, over here. It sounded familiar, in that generic way all voices can, like it was shaped to fit my expectation. I didn't answer. I raised the radio. Dispatch, I said, pressing transmit. I have static. No click, no response, just empty hiss. I let go of the button, tried again. Nothing. The voice called again, more urgent. Ranger, please! I looked toward where it came from. Trees, brush, a small dip in the ground like an old washout. No person. No movement. I took a step toward it, then stopped. Dispatch had told me not to approach voices. I didn't want to admit how much that sentence made sense now. Still, what if it was real? What if someone was hurt? What if I walked away and later found out I ignored someone who needed help? That guilt hook is dangerous. It makes you move when you shouldn't. Where are you? I called, keeping my voice flat. The reply came instantly. Right here. Not from the dip. From behind me. Every muscle in my body went tight. I spun. Nothing. Then I saw it. Just a flicker between trunks. Like a shadow slipping from one tree to the next. The same flat eyes. now closer, low to the ground as if it had crouched. And the voice came again, softer, right at the edge of hearing. Just come here. I backed up, slow. My boot hit something on the trail. I looked down. A piece of clothing. A jacket this time? Dark green. Ranger issue green. For a second, my brain refused to understand what it was seeing. Then, I recognized the shoulder patch. Older style. Faded. Not mine. Someone else's. I felt cold spread through my chest. The voice called again. And this time, it changed. It shifted pitch, trying something new, like it was testing what made me twitch. Help. The word sounded like a woman now. Thin, strained. I looked up and saw movement in the trees again. Two shapes. No. One shape. But moving in a way that suggested it could be anywhere. Like my eyes couldn't keep hold of it. Then, the thing stepped out far enough for me to see its full outline for the first time. It was taller than I thought. Long limbs. Too long. Elbows bending the wrong direction for a second before snapping into place. Its chest was narrow and high like a starving deer. But the posture was almost human. The shoulders rolled forward like it was trying to imitate the way we stand. Its head was wrong. Not antlers. Not a skull like stories. Something stripped down and stretched. The face too long. The mouth pulled back into something that might have been a grin if it wasn't full of darkness. But what made my stomach flip wasn't the mouth. It was the way it stood too still again. Like it was letting me see it on purpose. Like it wanted me to understand I wasn't spotting wildlife. I was being shown something. It stared at me again. And for a second, I realized I could see the clothes it had left behind in a different way. Not as a trail I found by accident, but as markers. Like breadcrumbs someone else had laid to get me to walk in a certain direction. Then, it lunged. Fast. No warning. No stalking grace. Just a sudden burst that turned the space between us into nothing. I ran. Not the controlled walking from before. Real running. Adrenaline dumping into my legs like gasoline. Branches snapped at my arms. Brush tore my pants. I didn't care. I only cared about distance and not falling. Behind me, the screech hit again. Closer. Mixed with the sound of something tearing through undergrowth without slowing. I didn't look back. Looking back is how you trip. The trail twisted and climbed. I recognized the slope now. The pull toward the ridge. The tower should have been ahead. Maybe 10 minutes if I didn't die first. Something brushed my pack, hard enough to yank me sideways. Not a branch. Not wind. A hand. It snagged fabric and pulled. I felt the strap jerk. I stumbled, caught myself, and heard the thing's breath. A wet inhale, right behind my ear. I swung my elbow backward blindly. It hit something hard and bony. It hissed, a sound like steam, and then it was on me. It raked across my back with something sharp. Pain flared hot and immediate, like someone dragged a row of fishhooks from my shoulder blade down to my ribs. My shirt tore. The cold air hit the raw skin underneath and made my vision spark. I screamed, and that sound made me angry, because it was exactly what it wanted. I kept running anyway, teeth clenched so hard my jaw ached. The tower came into view through the trees. Thin metal legs, the cabin roof catching the last gold light. It looked unreal, like something drawn on a postcard. I hit the clearing at the base of the tower and nearly tripped over my own feet. I grabbed the first stair railing and hauled myself up 2 steps at a time, boots clanging on metal. Behind me, the screech hit again, furious now, and I heard the thing slam into the bottom of the stairs. The whole structure shuddered. I didn't stop. I climbed until my legs burned and my back felt like it was leaking warmth down my spine. Halfway up, I risked a glance down. It was there at the base, looking up. In the slanting sunlight, its eyes didn't just reflect. They looked fixed, like holes drilled into the world. It didn't climb. It just stared as I climbed higher, like it knew I had to come back down eventually. I reached the platform, fumbled the key in the lock with shaking hands, and got the tower door open. I slammed it behind me and threw the deadbolt. Then I leaned against it, panting, trying not to pass out from the pain in my back. Through the window, I saw it move away into the trees. Not running, not panicked, leaving slow and controlled, like it was done for now, like it had learned what it needed. My radio crackled. A click. Then the voice came through. Calm again. Too calm.
Good,
It said.
you made it back.
I stared at the radio like it was a snake. Who are you? I whispered. The voice answered without hesitation.
Dispatch.
Then, softer, almost amused.
Don't go outside after dark.
And the line went dead. I looked toward the horizon. The sun was slipping behind the ridge. The woods below the tower were already turning black. I pressed a shaking hand to my back and felt wetness. Blood, warm under my palm. Below, somewhere in the trees, something moved just out of sight. Not rushing. Waiting. I forced my thumb down on the radio again. Harder this time, until my knuckle whitened. Dispatch? I said, voice shaking. This is Tower 12. I was attacked. I need immediate assistance. Static. Then, finally, another click. A different voice this time. Realer. Breath in the mic. Paper shuffling in the background.
Tower 12, copy. Stay inside. Another ranger is en route to you now. ETA approximately 40 minutes. Keep your line open.
Hope hit me so hard, it made my eyes burn. I looked out the window again. The tree line was just a dark edge now, and the last light was gone from the trunks. For a moment, I saw those flat eyes again, low in the shadow, watching the tower like it was watching a clock. And then they slid out of view, like it had time, like it could wait, and like 40 minutes was a very, very long time. Due to some circumstances out of my control, I need to live in constant motion. If I remain in one spot for too long, well, unpleasant things tend to happen. To avoid this, I took up a nomad lifestyle of living out of my car or in motels. Being a truck driver is out of the question, because I would be requested to have certain routes. I can't even stick to a certain routine for very long. I think this life may be hard on others, but I found myself perfectly content with always traveling. The only real downside is my bank account suffered. In order to stay warm and fed, I took jobs most people aren't even aware of, through a corporation regular folks should never find out about. Some of these jobs were simple. Go to one place and see if anything weird is afoot and report back. The corporation always needed eyes on the ground, and I didn't need to solve the problem, just confirm if there was one. I received a request to go speak with a forest ranger in a fire watch station a few drives away from my location. The job's payment was enough to cover at least a month's worth of gas, so I accepted right away. Sometimes I got lucky and could knock a few small jobs off at once, but this time I only had the interview request. I went directly to the listed forest and checked in with the ranger station. The ones on duty gave me side-eye, wondering why I wanted to talk to one of the rangers on duty. He hadn't told them about anything strange going on, and people tended to not want to hike all the way to the fire watch tower to give some news. I lied, saying I was a distant relative, and told them some family issues came up that the ranger needed to hear about in person. I didn't want to ruin his reputation, mentioning my real purpose for being there. They offered for me to talk to him on the radio, but I was adamant on walking over. They looked at my polished yet well-worn shoes and dress shirt. I may live on the road, but I dressed like an office worker when I took jobs. Nothing said I needed to dress sloppy just because I didn't have a real home. They waved me through, asking to sign out whenever I came back. The hike wasn't pleasant, and the heat made me unbutton my shirt a little by the time I could see the tower through the treetops. My shoes hurt my feet, and I cursed myself for being so stubborn on looking formal. I was getting paid for this, so I refused to complain to anyone but myself. I arrived at the base of the tower to see a man pacing, waiting for me. They sent him a radio message ahead of time, saying I would be on my way, and he assumed the real reason why anyone would come to see him in the middle of the forest. I raised a hand to greet him when we got closer. He was taller than myself, with a long beard. His eyes dark and sunken in his face, and his clothing hung loosely from his frame, as if he had lost a lot of weight recently. His hand shook at his side, clearly showing he wanted some sort of vice, but didn't have whatever his body craved. "Are you Barry?" I asked, not bothering with a last name. "That's me. You're the one they sent? The company that deals with this sort of thing, Mr. He trailed off, clearly forgetting my name. "Adelaide," I said quickly, and got right down to why I arrived. "You said you've been seeing things in the woods? What sort of things? Since a few hikers have gone missing, the corporation wanted to gather information to see if they could figure out the cause," I explained, sounding as positive as possible. Barry gave a distrustful look. He appeared to be the type of person who didn't believe in anything that lurked in the woods besides hungry bears. That was, until he experienced something strange himself. He acted reluctant to speak about it, even after I came all this way. But he needed to accept that no matter what I said, I wouldn't dismiss him outright. Finally, the ranger cracked, telling me the story he doubted anyone would take seriously. "I've seen a girl the past few months. She's dead. Or dead looking. I really didn't know what she would do to me, so I looked online and found all sorts of weird protection charms to keep her away at night. She just stands at the foot of the stairs, screaming for me to come down. I can't tell any of the other guys about this. They'll boot me for sure. I need this job. I can't do anything else. He sounded exhausted. I nodded, listening and taking in his story. I asked him to show me what he had set up and found salt lines and symbols drawn in chalk along the wooden railings. I knew from experience that the symbols did nothing. Most were from video games or other sorts of media. The salt may be useful on keeping some creatures away, but I didn't know what we were dealing with just yet. He even showed me some footprints in the dirt he said belonged to the girl who screamed at night. That was interesting. The shoe size was far too small to be his own. Either some person was out in the woods messing with him, or something unnatural really waited for the ranger when the sun went down. I checked the time, finding the sunset in about 3 hours. I debated on what I wanted to do. I wanted to believe him. I wouldn't dismiss a story like this because something supernatural was implied. But I couldn't take it at face value either. I needed more proof besides a tired forest ranger and some footprints. I didn't know how long it might take for the dead girl to show up. I could only risk staying for about 5 nights, maybe less. If signs of something odd didn't appear by then, another person needed to be called out to finish the job. My payment would be cut too. This dead girl needed to not be shy for my sake. I told Barry I wanted to sit and wait at the foot of the stairs that night to watch for her. He looked at me as if I was crazy, then got angry. "You don't believe me, do you?" he accused, the lack of a decent night's sleep causing him to have a short fuse. "I believe you, but in order to call in a more experienced agent to solve the problem, I need proof. The agents are in high demand. But I also need to know what we're dealing with so we can send in the right person for the job," I explained. Thank God I've been blessed with a soft voice. I calmed Barry down and he nodded. He didn't like the idea of me staying unprotected outside, though. He called the ranger station to tell them I would be staying the night. The sky started to change colors, and he went halfway up the wooden stairs. Looking down, he attempted to talk me into not staying so exposed one last time. "She'll kill you. I don't know how, but I know she can," he said, his voice shaking over the idea of the dead girl in the woods. "It's fine if she does," I replied, not thinking much about what I said. I mentally kicked myself and went on. "Don't worry about it. I've been through a lot of jobs like this," I assured him. He didn't look as if he believed me, but refused to stay anywhere but in his tower for the night. He left me behind when night fell. I wished I'd brought a jacket along when it started to get a bit chilly, as I waited for anything interesting to happen. Barry gave me a flashlight before he hid away for the night. I got bored and started to click it on and off under my chin, attracting bugs. I really didn't like the woods. I didn't mind the bugs, but hated getting bitten. In my line of work, nothing good happened in the woods. I felt as if humans should just steer clear of them, to avoid all the trouble. I heard something off in the trees and got to my feet. With the flashlight in hand, I scanned the woods trying to find the dead girl Barry spoke about. This was my job, but I still got a little scared. Alright, a lot scared. I felt terrified of seeing her. I wanted this all to be some sort of prank some bored high school kids were playing on the forest ranger that crashed their party in the summer. That wasn't the case, though, and I learned that the hard way. I turned to check behind me, convinced something might be crawling up, ready to attack. I breathed a sigh of relief, seeing nothing. Thinking myself a little bit silly from getting so worked up, I turned around again, and my heart nearly stopped when my light landed on a pale figure standing a few feet away. Barry wasn't lying about how she looked. If this was a prank, then the person behind it was better than any movie studio at doing makeup. I could no longer believe this was any kind of joke when my light shone through a rotten hole in the figure's stomach. My hand shook, and I almost screamed when she took a step closer. Her one foot twisted in a way that made her walk with a limp. Her skin was pulled back and clinging to her skull, her lips gone. Long, black hair limp and falling out in places. One hand missing some fingers, and I suspect some sort of small scavenger animal took them. At least now I knew sort of what I was dealing with. She was physical, not a ghost like I first assumed. Ghosts can emotionally break you to the point where you'll never recover. An undead creature like her could just kill me and eat my remains. Some days, I didn't know which was worse. I'm just here to help Barry. Could you tell me? I started to ask in a very scared tone I hated myself for. I wanted to ask her why she was there, and what she wanted. Sometimes creatures were friendly and just wanted to talk. I've come across a great deal of the nice monsters, but wasn't so lucky with her. At the mention of the ranger's name, she snapped, her mouth opening wide with a loud, echoing scream coming from it. I took 3 steps back by the time she covered the distance, her thin, rotten hands falling on my warm flesh and tearing. Her screams were the last thing I heard that night. She made quick work of my insides, and I bled out within seconds. I assumed she kept tearing my body apart, but I wasn't aware to know what happened after I died. Yes, I died. And when the sun rose, air filled my lungs again. I gasped and coughed, my body repaired as if nothing had happened. Not even my clothes remained torn. All the pieces back into place with only the tracks in the dirt, and a broken flashlight as evidence of the attack. I died and came back. Those are the circumstances that kept me on the road. I can't tell you how I gained this power. It's just something I found I had after death came for me one day, so many years ago. No matter how I die, I come back perfectly fine the next sunrise. I haven't been killed that many times since I found out about this odd quirk. I still felt pain and held on to the memories of my death, so I tended to avoid it if possible. I come back to life in the same spot I died in. So if someone were to bury me alive, every sunrise I would come back stuck in one spot. This power isn't as great as one assumes it to be. I rolled over, still dazed and trying to collect myself. It always took a few minutes to get past the pain of being killed. I sat up, trying to find traces of the girl. I did want to help her. Even after she killed me, I felt as if she needed someone on her side. Seeing her reaction and the state of her body, I started to get a terrible idea of what happened to her. I wanted to confirm my thoughts, though. Without having any cell reception, I needed to leave and come back after I gathered some more information. Barry must have seen my body from the watchtower, scattered in the dirt that night. I guessed he was asleep, or refusing to look outside, because he didn't call down when the dead person got up and started walking back down the trail in the gray morning light. I've never had someone watch the moment I came back to life, so I didn't know what it was like. Did all my body parts snap back together? Did I just reappear all fine and dandy? I decided I didn't like that train of thought. The idea of it was making my body itch. I stayed at a nearby hotel using their terrible Wi-Fi for the rest of the day. I went back down the hiking trail with a new flashlight and a plan in mind. I needed to confirm what I'd found out. It was just a theory, though, and if I wasn't right, I might just doom an innocent person. I arrived by the time the sun set. I noticed movement in the fire watch station. Barry was still there, and I didn't report into the ranger station, so I didn't know if he told the others about my death or not. "Hey, Barry, can we talk?" I shouted upwards, hoping he would hear me. It took a few minutes, but he opened the door and looked down. In the dark, I couldn't really see his face, but one could guess what expression he wore. A dead girl and now a dead man. I bet he thought he was losing it. She killed you," he shouted back down, sounding almost angry that I stood there alive and well. "Yeah, that sucked. Anyway, can you confirm something for me?" I asked, wondering if I needed to go up there and get him. His attention got drawn somewhere else. Even at a distance, I could guess at his line of sight. I brought my flashlight out to shine over the woods, in time to see the dead girl taking a few steps out. Her dead face looked shocked to see I was alive. I only had one shot at talking with her, before she snapped again. "Hey, I'm here to help you. Can you put off killing me for a minute?" I asked her in a softer tone than what I used with the ranger. When she didn't move, I looked back up at Barry. With her here, he wouldn't come down. I didn't like outright accusing someone of a crime, but he wasn't giving me much choice. "Anna Jones went missing 6 months ago. Her boyfriend was arrested under suspicion of killing her. He folded and admitted he assaulted her, but she fled into the woods still alive but injured. You were on the search team trying to find her. Why didn't you mention any of this?" I spoke sternly, making him read between the lines of what I wanted to say. "We never found her," Barry shot back, about to turn away and hide. The dead girl tensed at his words. She let out a low growl and her hand raised, ready to attack us. I knew she could tear through the watchtower door, and Barry had his time limited unless I kept talking. So why is she here? She wouldn't be standing at the tower every night tormenting you if you didn't do anything, I said back, the girl taking a few steps closer and causing my heart rate to spike. I swear, I never touched her, he shouted back, hysterical. Cut the shit, Barry. This time I shouted, my normal, kind tone lost in a deep growl. It startled Barry and Anna. She froze, not expecting the outburst. I really hated swearing, and only did so when needed. It jolted the ranger enough to say something that confirmed my terrible theory. She was gonna die anyway. The woods went silent as his words faded into the dark. I glanced over at Anna, her thin arms wrapped around her rotten body. She hunched over, shaking in rage over what happened before her death. Her boyfriend, someone she trusted, got drunk and assaulted her. Then she ran off into the woods, and at death's door another man showed up. Someone who should have done everything in his power to save her. I didn't ask him to elaborate on what he'd done. My throat already tasting like acid, and I had trouble keeping my own disgust to ward him down. As an act of revenge, she came back to torment him every night. Anna, strong enough to kill Barry with her undead body. But she wanted him to suffer for as long as possible. I felt myself agreeing with her. How she was moving around was a bit of a mystery. I've heard such a thing happening before, but not the reasoning behind it. Some places, like bayous and deep ancient forests, held power no humans understood. Sometimes this power acted in the strangest of ways when mixed with a human will. Anna had enough willpower to borrow some of the forest power and to make her rotting body move again out of spite. I respected her for that. She moved again, and I put myself between her and the stairs upwards. Her hand raised, and I remember the pain from the night before. I flinched, but stood my ground. Listen, please don't kill him. I swear, I have a good reason to ask you for this, I told her, arms spread wide, trying to keep her back. He deserves it, but I was sent here by a corporation that deals with supernatural creatures. If you're perceived as dangerous, they'll hurt you. I don't know if you'll still be alive after your goal of revenge is taken out, but I don't want to risk it. You shouldn't be punished for taking action against the one who hurt you. She hesitated, the dead face making it impossible to read her emotions. At least she listened. I took a step closer, waiting for her to lash out. When she didn't, I offered my hand. Let me call in some favors. We'll arrest him for what he did to you, and he'll rot in jail until he dies a natural death, or gets fresh with another inmate. I know people who owe me a few things. They can put a curse on him to ensure he doesn't take his own life. And they can also give him nightmares more terrifying than anything you could think of. That is, if that's what you want. A long, tense moment came between us. I knew Barry couldn't hear anything we said. I thought I heard him slam the watchtower door and lock it, but didn't risk looking up. Anna's dead eyes flicked over my own, trying to spot a lie. A drip of sweat ran down the back of my neck in the cool night air. Finally, she cracked. Her face muscles working to cause her lipless mouth to turn into an odd smile. I smiled back at her, my heart aching for what she went through. She took my hand, ready to let someone else take over her act of revenge, and happy she finally met someone she trusted. Although I did let her bang on Barry's door for a few hours that night, and scream to spook him a little bit. In the morning, I made some calls. The police came by and found Anna's body to be taken home and buried. She found a tree to curl up under, ready to not wake up again. Barry was arrested, and he raved about Anna coming every night and completely snapped. Him saying I'd been killed only to come back the next day didn't help his case at all. With some prodding, he admitted in detail what he'd done to a poor, lost, dying girl. But I never asked to hear what happened. Knowing as much as I did already felt like too much. I got paid a little extra for closing the case instead of just reporting on the details. The corporation knew of my ability to come back after death. They never abused it, though. Not once did they send me on a dangerous job, knowing I would be the only one to live through it. I didn't have any other strengths beside breathing again every morning after being killed, so was outright useless on bigger jobs. I kept looking over the extra amount in my bank account. It left a bad taste in my mouth. I got in contact with Anna's family and sent them the money for funeral costs. Attending the funeral didn't feel proper, so I promised myself to leave flowers at her grave at some point. I did have friends who could place the curses on Barry as promised, but never called them. His mind gone completely, he no longer had any notion of reality. The idea to end his suffering by his own hands would never come to mind. His every waking moment haunted by Anna, even though she no longer was around to do so. One small case was solved unexpectedly. I feared there may be more girls like Anna out there waiting to be found. Sadly, it wasn't my job to find them. I only got requests like hers on occasion. Most of the time, I needed to check and see if a hotel was haunted, or if a guy really did see the 10-foot beast in the woods, and wasn't just drunk off his ass at the time. I honestly wanted there to be less jobs and cases like this one, and that every person that got lost in the forest arrived home safe and sound. I hated every time I saw another set of parents grieving over their missing child. When it happened, and if I had spare time, I had some freedom to do whatever possible to bring them home, one way or another. At least each job paid me enough to afford gas, in order to get to the next one. Sometimes things turned out well. Sometimes they didn't. My life, like my death, was completely out of my control. Getting into my car, I found directions to the nearest and cheapest hotel to get washed up and rest before tackling the next request, and wondered where my life might take me. Even after doing this for so many years, I didn't have a clue of what would come next. I went out there because I needed one day where nothing could reach me. No emails, no neighbors, no more family group chat lighting up my phone with one more "Did you see this?" link. Just a stretch of winter bare hardwoods, and the kind of quiet you only get when the nearest road is a couple miles away, and even the birds don't feel like talking. That's what I told myself, anyway. The truth is, I've been sleeping like garbage. When I did sleep, it wasn't restful. It was the kind where you wake up with your jaw clenched and you can't remember the dream, only the feeling of something pushing on your chest. I wasn't looking for adventure. I wasn't looking for a story. I was looking for the opposite. Something ordinary enough to scrub my head clean. I parked at a pull-off that looked like it existed more for logging trucks than hikers. No sign, no kiosk, no laminated trail rules poster stapled to a post. Just a narrow path starting between two pines, and a strip of packed earth where other boots had gone before mine. I had water, a small first aid kit, a cheap headlamp, even though it was mid-afternoon, and a can of bear spray I bought the year before and never opened. I'd meant to take it on a trip out west. It ended up living in my glove compartment like a talisman. I checked the wind out of habit, cold and light, and started in. The woods were the kind that felt normal at first. Damp leaves underfoot, bark peeling on dead trunks, a thin crust of snow tucked into shaded pockets, like it didn't want to let go yet. I could hear my own breathing, the quiet creak of my backpack straps, and the occasional distant crack of a branch from something far off. 30 minutes in, I began to relax. I fell into the rhythm of walking and not thinking too hard. Then, I saw the tower. It didn't belong to a marked trail system. It sat on a ridgeline, barely visible through the trees at first. Just a vertical line that made my brain pause, trying to categorize it. Once I stepped into a break in the canopy, it was obvious. An old fire lookout tower, the steel kind with a square cab at the top. It rose above the surrounding trees like a skeleton. The legs were rusted. The cross bracing had patches where metal had been eaten down to flaky orange scabs. The stairs ran up the side in a tight switchback, and a few steps were missing entirely, like teeth knocked out. My first thought was that I'd wandered onto private land. My second thought was that it was too far back and too neglected for that. I stopped at the base, craning my neck. The cab windows were grimy. One was cracked. The door up top looked like it hung open slightly, the edge not sitting flush. There was no posted sign, no danger placard, no padlock on the lower gate because there was no lower gate. Just the first set of stairs, inviting in the worst way. I should have turned around right there. I knew that. I told myself I'd just take a quick look from the bottom. Just satisfy the curiosity and go. My phone didn't have service, so I couldn't even call anyone if I wanted to. That should have been a bigger red flag. But the tower had that pull old places have. The sense of a story trapped inside them. I started up. Every step made a sound. Metal whining under my weight. Bolts complaining. The handrail was cold enough to sting through my glove. I took it slow, testing each step before I committed. Some were solid. Some flexed just enough to make my stomach tighten. Halfway up, I smelled something faint but wrong. Not rot, not mold. Something like pennies, like wet iron. I paused and tried to place it. The wind shifted and it went away. At the next landing, I looked down through the open grid and saw my boot prints on the lower steps. They stood out in the thin film of frost. I told myself again, this was stupid. I could leave now. Then I saw something on the landing above me. A dark smear. It wasn't rust. Rust had a powdery texture. This looked wet and thick in the shadow. My hand tightened on the rail. I climbed 2 more flights, careful, and leaned in close to the smear. Blood. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. It had the glossy, tacky look of something that had started to dry, but hadn't had time to go brown and crust. It was streaked like something had been dragged, or like something had put their hand there and slid it along the metal. I went cold, in a way the air didn't explain. My brain did what brains do when they don't want to accept something. It tried to find another answer. Deer hit by a hunter, maybe? Someone gutted something up here? Some idiot doing a horror prank. Paint. But blood looks like blood. It sits in the light differently. I stared up toward the cab. That door was definitely ajar. There was a small gust of wind, and the door moved. Not a lot. Just a slight sway. Like it was breathing. I forced myself to keep climbing. Not because I wanted to go further. Because the part of me that couldn't stand not knowing needed one more piece of information. One quick glance. Then I'd leave and call it in once I got service. At the final flight, the smell hit me again. Stronger. Metallic and sharp, mixed with something sour. I stepped onto the platform outside the cab and froze. The cab was trashed. Not in the way abandoned places get trashed over years. Not graffiti and beer cans and sun-faded posters. This was recent, violent. One chair was overturned. A clipboard lay snapped in half, papers fluttering under it. A small table had been shoved hard enough to dent the wall. One of the windows had a spiderweb crack radiating from a central impact point. On the floor, there were dark spots and smears that dragged towards the cracked window, like someone had tried to crawl. There was a trail. Not a neat line. More like a story written in blotches. Blood leading to the window. The window itself was half open, shoved upwards, leaving a gap wide enough to squeeze through if you were desperate. The sill had scratches in the grime, fresh lines where fingers or something else had clawed for purchase. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch anything. I stood on the platform staring, with my heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my throat. A thought landed in my head with awful clarity. Someone didn't leave through the stairs. Someone went out the window. That didn't make sense. The drop from this height wasn't survivable. Not without breaking something. Not without it being the only option. I backed away from the open doorway, the metal platform cold under my boots. That was it. Curiosity satisfied. Whatever this was, it wasn't mine to solve. I turned and started down. I made it 2 flights before realizing how quiet it had gotten. Not nice quiet. Not woods in winter quiet. Wrong quiet. No little clicks of squirrel claws on bark. No distant woodpecker. No wind moving through the branches. It was like the air itself had stopped carrying sound. I paused on a landing, gripping the rail, and listened. Nothing. I told myself I was spooking myself. Adrenaline does that. It narrows your focus, makes the world feel staged. Then I heard a soft sound from below. A single, gentle tap on metal. I leaned over the edge and looked down toward the base of the tower. Something stood in the trees. At first, my brain said deer. It was the right shape. Tan body, long legs, narrow head. But it wasn't standing like a deer. It was standing too still, like it was holding a pose. And it was too close to the tower to have approached without me hearing it. Unless it had been there the whole time. It looked up. Our eyes met. That's the moment I noticed the legs. Deer legs have a certain angle, a certain logic. These bent wrong. The joints set just a little off. Like someone had built them from memory without understanding the mechanics. The knees, if you could call them that, seemed rotated, the way a human elbow would look if you forced it backwards. Its head tilted. The movement was slow and deliberate, like it wanted to show me it was paying attention. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I didn't shout. I didn't do anything. The deer, if it was a deer, took one step out of the trees, placing its hoof on the edge of the clearing around the tower. The hoof was wrong too. Not split the way a deer should be. It looked more solid, like a blunt shoe. Then, just like that, It took another step, and another, until it was standing at the base, directly below me. Looking up, my mouth went dry. My hands were sweating inside my gloves, and the metal rail felt slick. I told myself it was just an injured deer. A deer with some deformity. A deer that had been hit, maybe. My brain clawed for normal explanations, like it could anchor itself. But there was nothing normal about the way it watched me. It didn't blink. I realized then that I could see too much white. Not the sclera. Deer eyes don't show whites like humans. This was milky. The eyes were cloudy like cataracts, but still locked on me. I started down again, faster. Not running. Running would get me killed on these stairs, but moving with purpose. The tower groaned under me. Below, the deer moved. I heard it on the steps. That made my stomach drop. I hadn't thought it would climb. The sound wasn't the light clatter of hooves the way you hear in videos of deer on porches. This was heavier, like something wearing weight. I looked down again. It was on the first landing already. It shouldn't have been that fast. My headlamp bounced against my chest. My bear spray was in the side pocket of my pack. I reached for it without taking my eyes off the stairs, fingers fumbling for the zipper. The sound of it climbing came closer. Metal squealed. I went down another flight, then another, hands sliding on the rail, boots careful but quick. I made it to a landing where the railing was bent outward, and I had to step around it. For a second, my balance shifted and panic surged. One wrong move, and I'd go through the side. Behind me, the climbing stopped. I didn't feel relief. I felt dread. The stop was worse than the pursuit. I forced myself to look up. It stood 3 landings above me. Close enough that I could see details I didn't want to see. The head was deer-shaped, but not quite. The muzzle looked slightly too long, and the skin around it had a tight, stretched look, as if the face was pulled over bone that didn't match. Its mouth hung open slightly, and the teeth were wrong. Too even, too flat, more like a person's than a deer's. It stared down at me. Then it moved its jaw. Not chewing, not panting, shaping something. A sound came out. Soft at first, then clearer. Hey. It wasn't a perfect voice. It was like a bad recording. Like someone mimicking speech without knowing where the sounds come from. The word came out too slow, too wet. My whole body reacted before my mind did. My legs wanted to fold. My hands tightened until my knuckles hurt. The thing's head tilted again, exaggerated. Hey, it said again, a little better this time. I backed down one more flight, fighting the urge to turn and run. That's when it took another step, and another. It wasn't rushing, it wasn't panicking, it was matching me, hurting me. I got the bear spray out of my pack. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped it. I held it in front of me, thumb over the safety. Back off, I said, and hated how thin my voice sounded. The deer blinked once, slow. Then it smiled. Or tried to. The lips pulled back too far, exposing those flat teeth. The expression didn't fit on a deer face. It looked like a mask trying to do a human thing. "Back off," it repeated, and my blood went cold, because it said it in my exact cadence, my exact pitch, like it had just recorded me and played it back through a mouth built wrong. I felt something inside me snap from disbelief to survival. I started moving down faster, almost slipping. The deer followed. It didn't need to run. It climbed with that same heavy, confident pace, the metal stairs groaning under it. I could see my car in my mind like a lifeline, even though it was probably 20 minutes back through the woods. I just had to get off the tower, get away from the stairs. The stairs were a funnel, a trap. I hit the last flight and practically slid down. My boots hit the ground hard enough to jar my knees. The air down here felt different, warmer, like I'd stepped into a pocket. My ears rang with my own pulse. I didn't look back. I ran. Not full sprint at first, because the ground was uneven and slick with leaves, but fast enough that my breath burned. Behind me, the tower groaned, then a heavier metallic clank as the thing descended faster. I ran towards the trail, following my own footprints in the thin frost. The woods looked the same as before, but now, everything felt staged. Trees felt too close, shadows too thick. Every branch felt like it would snag me. I heard something behind me. Footsteps. Not the light, delicate steps of a deer. 2 beats, then a pause, then 2 beats again. Like someone was trying to walk like an animal. I risked a glance over my shoulder. It was behind me, weaving through the trees. Still shaped like a deer, but moving wrong. It didn't bound like a deer. It didn't float over the underbrush. It stepped with intention, lifting its legs too high, placing them down too carefully. And it was watching me the whole time. Its head stayed turned toward me, even as its body angled forward, like an owl. I ran harder. My lungs burned. The cold air cut my throat. I could taste that metallic smell again, like it was following me on the wind. The trail dipped, and I had to hop over a downed log. My foot caught on a slick patch of moss, and I stumbled, catching myself on a sapling. Pain flared in my palm, where a branch had jabbed through my glove. I barely noticed. I kept going. The footsteps behind me sped up. Not running, not galloping, just closing the distance with calm certainty. I fumbled the bear spray in my hand. The can felt too small, useless, like bringing a lighter to a house fire. I came around a bend and saw a split in the trail, one path wider and more used, one narrow and overgrown. I didn't remember it being there. I didn't remember seeing any split on the way in. I hesitated for half a second, then took the wider path because it felt more likely to lead back to the parking pull-off. The moment my boot hit that path, the woods changed again. Not visually, not in some magical way, just in the way the air sat. It felt heavier, and the silence got worse. The footsteps stopped. I slowed, heart hammering. I looked back down the trail. Nothing. No deer, no movement, only trees. My relief lasted about 2 seconds, because then I heard it. A breath right behind my ear. I spun. It wasn't behind me. It was to my right, just off the trail, half hidden behind a maple. So close I could see the wet shine of its nostrils. Its eyes were clearer up close, and that was worse. They weren't cloudy. They were human. Not shaped like a human's, but the focus in them was human. The awareness, the intent. It leaned forward slightly, like it was curious. "Hey," it said again, softer this time. My body moved before my brain gave it permission. I raised the bear spray and hit the trigger. A stream of orange mist blasted in the face. The knot deer jerked back, head snapping upward, and it made a sound that wasn't a deer sound. Not a bleat, not a snort, a wet, broken scream. It stumbled. Claws. Because now I say they were claws, not hooves, scraping bark as it tried to get away from the spray. The smell of pepper hit my nose, and my eyes watered instantly. My throat seized. I coughed, choking on it. The knot deer thrashed, and for a second it stood upright. Not fully, not comfortably, but enough. Enough that I saw the front legs bend and straighten like arms. Enough that I saw the chest was wrong, too broad, with a suggestion of ribs under a stretched hide. Enough that my brain screamed, "This thing can do more than you think." It dropped back down on all fours with a jolt, and took off into the trees, crashing through branches, still screaming, the sound fading into the distance. I stood there shaking, bear spray can still hissing as I kept the trigger pressed out of pure panic. When I realized it was gone, I let go and the can went quiet. My lungs burned. My eyes stung. Snot ran down my face. I wiped it with my sleeve, smearing it across my cheek. I didn't feel safe. I felt like I just made it angry. I forced myself to move. The trail ahead looked normal again. The wider path continued through the trees. I started walking fast, then jogging, then breaking into a run whenever the ground allowed. I kept the bear spray in my hand with the safety off, thumb ready. Every sound made me flinch. A branch snapping, leaves shifting, the distant call of something that might have been a bird. I kept expecting it to hit me from the side. I kept expecting that wet hay in my ear again. 10 minutes passed, then 15. My legs started to ache. My lungs felt raw. I began to see light through the trees, the suggestion of a clearing. Hope flared so hard it made me dizzy. Then my foot snagged. It wasn't a root. It wasn't a rock. It was something looped around my ankle. I went down hard. My knee slammed into a buried stone, sending a bolt of pain up my leg. My palms hit the ground. the bear spray can skittering out of my hand and landing in dead leaves. I rolled over gasping and saw it. A length of braided cord, thin but strong, pulled taut between two saplings. A trip line. Someone had set it. Or something. I scrabbled for the bear spray. A shadow moved at the edge of the trees. The knot deer stepped into view. It wasn't charging. It wasn't rushing. It was walking like it had all the time in the world. Its face was streaked wet, and its eyes were narrowed now. Not in pain, in focus, like the spray had sharpened it. It stopped a few yards away and stared at me. I grabbed the bear spray, got the nozzle up, and tried to stand. My injured knee buckled, and I went down again with a strangled sound. Pain pulsed through the joint. Something in there felt wrong, twisted. The knot deer took one step closer. My thumb hit the trigger. The can sputtered. The stream was weak, the can nearly empty. Panic surged so hard it made my vision tunnel. The knot deer tilted its head and opened its mouth. This time, it didn't say hey. It said my name. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but close enough that my stomach dropped into my boots. It had heard me earlier, probably talking to myself, probably muttering under my breath like I always do when I hike alone. It said it like it was testing it. I screamed at it, some incoherent noise, and hit the trigger again. A last weak puff drifted out. The knot deer flinched back, not from the spray, but from my scream, like it hadn't expected real emotion. Then, it lunged. It moved so fast, I didn't even process it as motion. 1 second, it was yards away. The next, it was on me. Its weight hit my chest, knocking the air out of me. I felt its claws rake across my jacket, tearing fabric. One caught my forearm and sliced through layers like they were paper. Hot pain flashed, immediate and sharp. I twisted, trying to get it off of me, and its face came inches from mine. It smelled like wet fur and old pennies and something spoiled. Its mouth opened too wide, and inside, behind those flat teeth, I saw a second set. Smaller, pointed, like something that had no business being inside a deer. I jammed the bear spray can into its mouth on instinct. It bit down. The can crunched. For a second, it held there, teeth sunk into metal, eyes locked on me. Then it jerked its head, yanking my arm with it, and the claws dug into my shoulder. I felt something pop in my shoulder, pain exploding, and I screamed. My mind went blank, except for one thing. Get up, get up, get up! My hand flailed around in the leaves and found a rock. Not a big one, just big enough. I swung it up and slammed it into the side of the knot deer's head. Once, twice. The third hit landed with a dull, awful thud, and the knot deer's grip loosened. It reeled back, still straddling my chest, and made that broken scream again. Quieter, angrier, I rolled out from under it and tried to stand, using my good leg. My bad knee screamed at me. My shoulder felt like it was hanging wrong. Blood ran down my forearm, warm and slippery, soaking my glove. The knot deer shook its head, then looked at me again with that calm focus. It wasn't done. It wasn't scared. It was assessing, like it was deciding whether the meal was worth the fight. I backed away, limping, I scanning for anything I could use. My gaze landed on a fallen branch, thick and heavy like a crude club. I grabbed it with my good hand, lifting it between us. The knot deer stepped forward. I swung. The branch connected with its shoulder, and it stumbled, more from surprise than pain. I swung again, catching it across the muzzle. It snapped its head sideways and bit into the branch. The wood cracked under its teeth. It yanked hard. I held on, and my injured shoulder screamed. But I didn't let go. The knot deer pulled, dragging me forward. Then it did something that made my stomach flip. It stood again. Not upright like a person, but close enough. The front legs bent and straightened as it pulled the branch closer, and its chest rose like it had lungs built for something else. It leaned its face toward mine, and spoke in a voice that was almost mine. Stop. The word came out clean, like it had finally figured it out. I shook my head, tears streaming from pain and pepper spray residue and sheer terror. No, I rasped, and yanked the branch back with everything I had. The knot deer's grip slipped. I used the moment to stumble backwards, then turned and ran, limped really, toward the clearing I'd seen earlier. My vision blurred, the world narrowed to light and the sound of my own ragged breath. Behind me, I heard it follow. Not rushing, keeping pace. I burst through the trees into the clearing, and the sudden openness made me almost collapse with relief. My car was there, parked crooked in the pull-off just like I'd left it. I almost sobbed. I fumbled for my keys with shaking hands, nearly dropping them. My blood slicked the metal. I got the key into the door, yanked it open, and practically fell into the driver's seat. I slammed the door and locked it. My hands shook so badly I fumbled the ignition. Outside, the knot deer stepped into the clearing. It stopped a few feet from the car and stared at me through the windshield. In the open light, it looked even more wrong. The proportions were off. The legs too long. The neck too thick. The head slightly too big. It lifted its muzzle and pressed it to the glass. I held my breath, frozen, expecting the glass to shatter. It didn't. It just stared. Then, it opened its mouth. "Hey," it said softly, like a greeting between friends. I turned the key. The engine coughed, then roared to life. The knot deer flinched at the sound. I threw the car into reverse and backed out so fast the tires spun on gravel, throwing stones. The knot deer moved, but not to chase. It stepped back and watched as I spun the car around. Watched as I hit the road too hard. Watched as the tree swallowed it again in my rearview mirror. I didn't stop driving until my hands started cramping around the steering wheel. I didn't stop until I hit a patch of road where my phone buzzed with service. I pulled over so hard I nearly went into the ditch. My hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't dial 911. When the operator answered, I tried to speak and realized I was crying. I gave them the location as best I could. I told them about the tower, the blood, the struggle. I told them something attacked me. I didn't say not deer. I didn't say it spoke. I said an animal because I wanted them to come, and I didn't want to sound like the kind of person they ignore. An ambulance met me 10 minutes later at a gas station off the highway. I sat on the curb while a paramedic wrapped my arm. The cuts weren't deep enough to hit tendon, but they bled like crazy. My knee was swelling fast, and my shoulder was wrong. They immobilized it, asked me what happened. I told them I didn't know. That was true, in a way. A sheriff's deputy showed up while they were loading me into the ambulance. He asked for details, wrote things down. His eyes flicked to the bear spray can sitting on my passenger seat, crushed and dented. He asked why it was crushed. I said it got bitten. He stared at me for a long second, then nodded like he'd heard worse. At the hospital, they cleaned me up, stitched the deeper cut on my forearm, confirmed my shoulder was partially dislocated, confirmed I'd sprained my knee badly. Nothing life-threatening, just enough to make sure I'd remember it every time I reached for something on a high shelf, or stepped off a curb wrong. I gave my statement again. The deputy asked if I'd seen another person out there. I told him no, but I told him about the blood in the tower and the trail leading to the window. I told him I thought someone might have been hurt. He left, said they'd check it out. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the beeps and the distant murmur of nurses. And every time a footstep paused outside my door, my body tensed. Sometime around 3 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. I hadn't noticed any missed calls. The number was blocked. My stomach dropped. I stared at it until my hand stopped shaking enough to press play. At first, there was only static. Then, a soft sound, breathing, and then, in a voice that was almost mine, but not quite, like it was being played through something wet.
Hey.
I sat up so fast my shoulder screamed. The voicemail continued. There was rustling, like leaves, a faint metallic clank, like a tower groaning in the wind. Then, my name again, drawn out wrong, like it enjoyed the shape of it. And finally, quiet laughter. Not a deer sound, not a human sound either, just something amused. The message ended. I stared at my phone until the screen went dark. In the morning, the deputy came back. His face was different than the day before. Tight, controlled. He said they found the tower. He said they found blood, just like I'd reported. He said they found signs of a struggle. He said they found drag marks leading to the window. He also said they found something else. Tracks. He didn't say what kind. He just said they were odd. And he said there were no bodies. No missing persons report that matched. No hikers reported overdue in that area. No campsites nearby. Nothing. I asked if they found an animal, a deer, anything. He looked at me like he was deciding what to say. Then he said, carefully, "We didn't see anything when we went in." I didn't like the way he said it. Like he was leaving out the part where they heard something. Like he didn't want to put certain words in the air. He told me to stay out of those woods. Like that was an option I'd ever consider again. He gave me a card with his number in case I remembered anything else. When he left, I deleted the voicemail. Then I realized something that made my blood go cold all over again. Deleting it didn't matter. Because that voice didn't need my phone. It didn't need technology. It had been close enough to whisper in my ear in the middle of the woods. And now it knew where I lived. Because my license was on file. Because I told the hospital who I was. Because I'd called for help like a rational person. I sat there, staring out the hospital window at the parking lot below, watching normal people walk to their cars with coffee cups and backpacks, and no idea what the woods can do when something decides you're interesting. I told myself it had followed me because it was hungry, because it wanted to hunt, because it was a predator. But predators don't leave voicemails. Predators don't repeat your words back to you just to see how you react. Predators don't take their time. That thing in the woods didn't want to eat me. Not right away. It wanted something else. Practice, maybe. A voice. A name. A way to get closer next time. And the worst part? The part that still sits like a weight in my chest? Is the memory of that fire lookout tower. The blood. The window. Someone went out of that window because staying inside was worse. And whatever made them choose that is still out there.
I always wanted to be a park ranger, for as long as I can remember. Being out in nature, hiking, camping, and fishing, that's pretty much all I wanted to do as a kid. And once I realized that profession existed, that was my only career pursuit, and I trained for it like an astronaut going to outer space. Reading up on all the necessary qualifications, I learned that it was a pretty daunting undertaking in a lot of ways. To be a park ranger, you need to be an expert outdoorsman. You need to be physically strong and have good endurance. You need to be confident with firearms if you're working in an area with bears and cougars. And you need to have first aid training and a range of other certifications. But those hurdles didn't stop me, they inspired me. Throughout my late teens and early 20s, I had a corkboard on my bedroom wall with every park ranger requirement listed on it, flanked by photos of my favorite national parks. And I checked the qualifications off one by one, celebrating as I achieved them. Living at home with my parents, I saved up every penny I earned, with the goal of going to school for conservation enforcement, one of a few programs geared towards people in my aspiring line of work. Eventually, I got my diploma from a nearby community college, which was about all I could afford. It took a while, and I worked a lot of shitty, odd jobs. But eventually I was hired full-time by the Forestry Service as a fire lookout. This was after at least 30 rejected applications, and by that point the recruiters probably knew my resume off by heart without even reading it. I was thrilled, accepting the job over the phone with a cry of joy, to which my boss laughed and said he was looking forward to meeting me. Throughout my on-the-job training, I picked things up quickly, and my supervisor, named Ross, said I was a natural. It wasn't long before he was sending me out alone to clear brush or do simple tasks, despite the fact that he was supposed to be shadowing me all the time. He said he trusted me, and that it took a lot to gain his trust. On my last day of training at Fire Tower 14, we were sitting in the cabin playing chess when Ross noticed something in the distance. A bit of smoke rising up out of the trees. It was just a wisp of white smoke, indicative of a campfire. We should probably go check that out, Ross said, handing the binoculars to me and pointing. I saw it immediately and nodded, thinking it would be nice to get out and do something different. The routine of clearing brush and taking out the trash, reading books, and playing board games and cards was getting monotonous. It was late afternoon, and there were still several hours of sunlight left. I grabbed my backpack and rifle, filled my canteen with water, and was about to set out when Ross muttered something over my shoulder. "Son of a bitch," he said, a little louder this time. It wasn't like him to curse, and I was a little surprised to hear him do it. Ross had always reminded me of a Boy Scout in a man's body. His enthusiasm for the job was infectious, and he was always in a good mood. "What?" I asked, walking over to him. "It's another one. Nobody bothers getting a camping permit anymore these days." He pointed at another fire burning in the distance, this one a little closer. Normally, we wouldn't go out to bother campers, but these were not registered camping sites, and people like that often didn't bother to clean up after themselves, and sometimes got injured out in the woods since they weren't prepared. Most people who care enough to go camping properly will actually acquire a camping permit. They know it isn't worth the risk of being fined. These people clearly didn't care. "You know what?" Ross said, looking at me. "This is actually perfect. It's your last day of training, which means next time something like this happens, you're going to be on your own. Nobody around for miles. So let's split up the two offenders, and we'll each take one. I'll be in radio contact with you the whole time." They look like they're only a couple miles away from each other. How's that sound? Despite the fact that I'd been eager for the job my entire life, now that I was faced with the prospect of doing it alone, I was a little nervous, but I nodded my head, agreeing with his plan. "Alright, let's do it," I said. "Just like we practiced," he told me as we began to climb down the stairs from the tower. "Don't get into any confrontations. If they want to get into an argument, you walk away. You call me for backup. Otherwise, just leave them the citation, move on. Tell them to find a new campsite or we'll come back to confiscate their gear. You know, the usual routine." The two of us took the Jeep, which was parked at the base of the tower, and drove down the dirt trail until we saw the first vehicle, pulled over at the side of the road. It was empty, with no one inside. "Okay, you take this one. Radio me once you make contact. Remember, don't take any unnecessary risks. If anything doesn't seem right, just let me know." Ross looked very nervous all of a sudden, and it was making me more worried than I had been a second before. He looked like he wanted to say something else, and opened his mouth as if he were about to do so, but then shook his head as if telling himself not to. After a few seconds of awkwardness, I reassured him I'd radio him once I'd made contact. He told me to get going and stay safe, driving off once I'd shut the passenger door of the Jeep. I was left alone, surrounded by wilderness. Taking a deep breath and letting it out, I began to march into the trees towards the smell of campfire smoke in the distance. The brush was thick, since there was no real trail here, but I could see where the campers had dragged their cooler through the shrubbery, and could make out their boot prints in the mud. If I had to make a guess, there were at least 3 or 4 of them. It didn't take long before I came across a clearing, and standing in the middle of it was a large stone archway. The human-made structure was about a 10-minute walk from the road and looked like a bridge constructed for a railroad to pass over it. But it made no sense for it to be way out here in the middle of the forest, away from any civilization, and far away from any active railroads. A dirt path emerged from nowhere, leading towards this arch and going underneath it to the other side, seeming to beckon me. I didn't know the area well enough to say that this was completely out of the ordinary, but to my eyes it did look unusual. Ross hadn't mentioned any decommissioned railroads passing through this part of the forest, but then again it could have been long out of use and ancient. When I approached the stone archway, I got a queasy rising feeling in my stomach, like when you're a kid in the backseat of a car, and your parents are driving down a hilly dirt road, and you go over a steep hill too fast on the opposite side. Looking through the archway, I saw the sky was a bruised shade of purple on the other side. Black clouds floated along, in stark contrast to the clear blue sky, which I'd seen from the watchtower. I looked over my shoulder, and the sky was blue. I looked straight ahead again, and saw it was that surreal purple shade, but only on this side of the archway. What the hell? I muttered to myself, walking through the stone archway to the other side. The moment that I did, my body broke out in pins and needles, as if every limb had fallen asleep for just a second, but then the sensation passed. I felt as if I had crossed over some threshold into another world, but I convinced myself I was just being foolish, letting my adrenaline get to me. This was simply a new and scary experience, being alone by myself out here, but I would need to get used to it fast. Steeling myself with a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and continued marching forward. The forest was still the same, but the sky was that dark purple shade, and I didn't understand why it would look like that. It was still a few hours until sunset, so it wasn't being caused by the sun's approach towards the horizon. There's something else. A forest fire, maybe? Ross, come in, Ross, I said into my radio, which was clipped to my uniform shirt. There was a burst of static, but nothing came after that. Ross, status update, come in, Ross. Again, there was nothing. Great, some backup you are. The forest swallowed me up again as I walked along the path until it disappeared. Strangely, the woods were difficult to traverse in this section. Huge trees blocked my path, their low branches impossible to get around. I had completely lost the camper's trail, and I was starting to worry I'd lost my bearings altogether. So I pulled out my compass to regain my trajectory. When I looked down at the face of the compass, it didn't make sense. It wasn't pointing in any one direction. Instead, it spun around in lazy half and quarter circles, reversing and changing direction constantly. Then it began to spin in a maddening arc, faster and faster, going in circles until the glass broke and the needle flew off into the sky, completely unhinged from the device. I heard it whiz past my ear like a stray bullet. Okay, that was weird. I tried to comprehend what was happening. What could cause a compass to do that? A strong magnet? That was impossible, though. All of this was impossible. I looked up at the sky and traced the bruised purple color, turning my head so I could see behind me. The violet shade now covered the sky entirely, including behind me where it had been bright blue just minutes before. What the hell was going on? I turned around and started back, my heart beating fast, my legs trembling and numb, feeling like blocks of wood attached at the waist. Had a nuclear bomb detonated somewhere? Was this the end of the world? Was that why the sky looked so strange now? I keyed the radio again, hoping I would get a response from Ross as I blundered through the forest, feeling sick. Felt like I was going to throw up. "Ross, come in, Ross." I practically screamed into the radio, but there was no answer. I began to run, picking up my pace. It was that archway, that fucking archway. I should have never gone through it. I could tell it was wrong. I could tell it was evil. That feeling of pins and needles, that rising sensation in my gut. Every part of my body had been trying to tell me not to go through the thing, but I hadn't listened. I'd heard stories before. I'd read tales on the internet of back rooms and hidden interdimensional portals that led to places like this that shouldn't exist. Dimensions locked away through space and time and other mechanisms we don't understand, which people stumble into and can't escape. Stairs that lead to nowhere but take a portion of your lifespan should you decide to climb them, causing you to vanish and disappear from your friends for untold lengths of time. People are missing in national parks all the time. There was no explanation for it. At least not until now. I pushed aside the brush and made my way to the forest into the clearing where the archway had been. My heart sank as I stared at the blank spot where it had been. The stone archway was gone. I stood there for a while just staring at the blank space where it previously stood, but it didn't change the fact that the thing had vanished. I spun around in circles, thinking maybe I'd lost my way and gone off track. Maybe this was all in my head and I just lost track of time, and that's why the sky was purple and why I was having trouble finding my way back. I wasn't trapped in another dimension. I just spaced out and the sun was setting. That was all it was, nothing more. I convinced myself this was true, even though part of me knew that it wasn't. If I kept walking in this direction, I told myself I would hit the dirt road eventually. I was sure enough of my bearings to know that the road lay in this direction, and I could be simply walking back to Tower 14 from there, once I found it. Sure, Ross would be pissed. He would tell his bosses that I needed more training, but he would say that I wasn't ready yet. But that was okay. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe despite all the years of getting ready for this day, maybe I was still just an amateur. With this new plan in mind, I kept walking straight back the way I'd come. I knew better than to push it when I'd already lost my bearings, not to mention my compass. The best bet was just to walk along back to the safety of the road. The longer I walked, though, the more I began to realize what I suspected deep down was true. The road was not there. Oh no, 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 no. I muttered to myself as my progress came to a halt. It's not here. The road should have been here. Even if I was slightly off course, I should have seen it by now, but it was nowhere to be found. Worse than that, the sky was getting dimmer with those horrible black clouds covering up the patches of purple and filling them in with malignant darkness. "Ross, please come in," I yelled into the radio for what felt like the 100th time. A clap of thunder boomed overhead, sounding discordant and wrong to my ears. It was a bad imitation of thunder, a Foley artist still learning the ropes as he shook out a giant sheet of tin like a rug on cleaning day. It warbled and shook the ground like the reverberations were lasting for far too long afterwards. And that was what did it. That sound of alien thunder brought me over the edge of certainty, and I knew for sure in that moment what I'd suspected all along. This wasn't the national park. This wasn't even Earth anymore. At least not my Earth. I truly had slipped into another dimension through that gateway. Despite how mad it all sounded, I was on the other side of some multi-dimensional portal. And not only that, now the gateway was gone. I was trapped here. Turning around, I decided I needed to go back to the place where I'd found it. Even if it was gone now, I would have to return eventually. That was my only hope. I couldn't stay in this place. I didn't belong here. And who knew what creatures might lurk in the forest like this after dark. Even in our world, there were wolves, cougars, coyotes, and bears. I shuddered to think what version of predator might live unchecked in this universe without people around to keep their numbers down. As if the forest had read my mind, I heard a rustling sound to my right. The light was dimmer now, and it was difficult to see, but I thought I noticed something a ways off in the distance, ducking behind trees and hiding from view, following me through the dark forest. Was it a person? Kind of looked like one. "Hello?" I called out, my voice breaking with fear. "Hello?" I called back, sounding like a tape recording of my own voice, slightly sped up and slowed down halfway through the word. The thing paused momentarily as it ducked out from behind the trees, looking at me, measuring me, standing in plain view for the first time as if letting itself be seen. My skin turned ice cold when I caught a full glimpse of it. It saw me, and that was for sure, and it was following me. The dark humanoid shape had grayish-blue skin and at least 2 sets of arms. It walked on 2 legs and ducked behind each tree as it passed by so as not to be seen. Its face was shrouded in long black hair which covered its visage like heavy curtains. It was completely naked and unclothed, its genitals covered by its long hair, carrying nothing with it. To my eyes, it looked like an animal. A creature more than a person, although it walked on 2 legs and resembled a human. The extra set of arms was the most jarring aspect of it, though. It made it feel so much more like a nightmare, like this couldn't possibly be happening. My heart was pounding fast as I tripped over branches and fallen trees, stumbling and rising to my feet and looking to see the thing was even closer now. It was on a diagonal path through the trees, pursuing me, but also making its way closer and closer to me. For the first time, I saw its eyes through the tangled mask of hair. They were reflective and gold like a cat in the night. And then I saw its teeth and its rancid, rotten smile. It rubbed its 4 hands together in a ball of moving flesh and fingers, like an excited old man about to eat his favorite meal. The creature knew I was scared, and it was enjoying itself, enjoying the hunt. Another twig snapped underfoot, and I at first thought it was my own foot which had done it, since the sound was so close. But then I realized it was only a few feet away, which meant I spun around in time, just in time, to see a face appear in front of me. At first I thought it was another one of those things, and almost took a wild swing at it. But then I saw the face was human. He was a man wearing a park ranger uniform. His hair was shoulder-length and greasy, and he had a long beard which was untrimmed and scraggly. "Get behind me!" he yelled suddenly, and as I did as he asked, instinctively hearing the sound of movement coming toward us through the brush from where the creature had been. The sound of the rifle's report was deafening. My ears were still ringing when he fired again a few moments later. "That's my last bullet," he said, grabbing my arm and pointing to my feet. "I hope you brought some ammunition with you. Those things don't like to die." Noises could be heard behind us, and I realized that the creature was still in pursuit, despite 2 well-placed rifle rounds. And I was compelled to follow the strange man as he raced ahead of me, looking back at me occasionally to see if I was still trailing him. I didn't have time to ask questions. I didn't have time to think about the fact that this archway was getting further and further away with each step. All I could do was run. And soon the sounds of more racing footsteps joined the first creature. There were several of them, and they were all hungry, moving in a pack like humanoid wolves. I only hoped this man knew where he was going, and that he had a plan to survive. My first week as a fire lookout stationed at Tower 14 had started off okay. All my life I'd wanted to be a park ranger, and now I was within 1 day of accomplishing my goal. After this final day of training, I was to be left on my own. But something catastrophic had happened, derailing all of those plans. After seeing 2 separate fires burning in the distance, my supervisor and I had set off in our Jeep to check out what we assumed were campfires. He had left me alone to investigate one group of offenders while he approached the other campsite. and everything was going according to plan until I stumbled across a stone archway in the forest that looked very out of place. On the other side, the sky was purple, whereas on our side it was blue. But I mistook that for the setting sun or some other phenomena, and pressed onward, going through it. I wish I'd trusted my instincts and stayed on the other side of the arch, because now I'm trapped in another world with no way home. The archway disappeared, leaving me stranded here, and I quickly realized I wasn't alone. There were creatures in the forest that looked like people but were not. They had an extra set of arms, for one thing, and they called back to you if you spoke, but they were not human. Despite all odds, I'd been rescued by another park ranger right before getting mauled by the bizarre creatures. This man, who told me his name was David, said he had been trapped in this place for a month. He had a cave which he managed to camouflage with tree branches, allowing us to hide from the creatures after escaping from them. David knew a lot about this place, and he said the creatures avoided a certain part of the forest, so that was where he took me. He had set up traps which only he knew the placement of, and his hideout was there, stocked with provisions. "A lot of the plant life here is the same as in our world," he told me when we arrived back at his camp. "I found a patch of shiitake mushrooms, and I've been surviving off of those more or less. I had a few things in my bag, an energy bar, some trail mix, you know, the usual stuff. But I ran out of that pretty quickly." He showed me his little pile of foraged food, and I marveled at how well prepared he was. There were different species of mushrooms, some wild root vegetables, and some roughage he'd set aside to make a salad with. "This is incredible," I said. "And I thought I was a good survivalist." You're still young," he told me. "I've been doing this sort of thing for a long time. I was in the British Special Air Forces when I was younger. They're highly trained soldiers, sort of like your special forces. Since I got across the pond, I've worked here and there, but most recently I've been a fire lookout at Tower 14 for almost 10 years. I let out a soft gasp. "That's where I'm stationed." "You worked at Tower 14? He chuckled. "Worked. Past tense. Damn. Those bastards replaced me already, eh? Well, I guess they must have given up looking for me too, then." I thought back to that odd look Ross had given me when he was letting me out of the Jeep. He looked like he was going to say something, but maybe "don't get killed or disappear like the last guy" would have been too on the nose. Maybe he'd been thinking about how this was a bad idea, I realized. Maybe he was thinking we should go together, but instead he'd let me go alone. I felt a twinge of anger thinking about how none of this would have happened if Ross had been shadowing me like he was supposed to. "They're still looking for you," I said, not really knowing if that was true. "I'm sure they are. They wouldn't just forget about you. Ross didn't get around to telling me yet, that's all. I'm still in training." I didn't add that this was my last day of training, or that David's appearance seemed to have been purposely omitted from my orientation. David eyed me suspiciously, but didn't say another word about it. "I was going back out to look for more mushrooms when I spotted you. It's too dangerous to go out again tonight, but tomorrow we'll check for the Archway again, and I'll show you the shiitake grove. I go back to that same spot every day and look for the arch. Can't believe I missed it." He was peeling a mushroom with his knife as he spoke. With that last sentence, he hurled the blade across the room, where it clanged against the rock wall, making a loud noise. "Quiet," I yelled at him. "I know you're upset, but we're gonna get out of here." His face was emotionless as he looked back at me, tears welling up in his eyes. "That's what I've been telling myself for the last 36 days, he said. "I just hope to God you're right." As I tried to fall asleep that night, I couldn't. The idea of a man like David being brought to tears by this place was almost too much to bear. He was a killing machine, British Special Forces. He'd saved my life and pulled me out of a situation where I thought I'd be dead for sure. At least we had more ammunition now, 2 guns. Still, that didn't reassure me very much. Those creatures, whatever they were, did not like to die. I managed a few hours of off and on sleep before the sun came up, still appearing that same horrible shade of purple as it had the day before. It was starting to hurt my head. It felt just wrong being in this place, like we didn't belong here. Like the air was too thick and too heavy, not meant for me to breathe. Without even realizing it, I had begun to hyperventilate. I tried to stop myself, to calm myself down, but was unable to. David came over and looked in my eyes, and after a while I started to hear the words he was saying. The cave was still beginning to turn darker and darker all around me, but I could feel myself losing consciousness, and I finally managed to listen to him. "Breathe deep," he said. "Slow it down. That's okay. You're okay. I've lived here this long. The air is breathable. You're okay, big boy. Big deep breaths, lad. Good boy. Okay, that's it. That's better. Keep breathing in and out." After a while, I started to calm down and looked at him gratefully, realizing the predicament I had been in. "Thanks," I said. "I needed that." "Stay there. Get your wits about you. I've got breakfast ready," he said, and I realized he had a portion of mushrooms and wild lettuce set aside for me. He brought it over on a flat rock and handed the food to me. "What's the plan?" I asked, eyeing the food suspiciously. Despite the fact that he said it was okay, I was still concerned. "Eat," he told me. "You need your energy. We're going to walk back over to the shiitake patch. On the way, we'll check for the arch. On the way back, we'll check again. That's all we can really do. It's not safe lingering out there for too long. Those things, they can smell us." I managed to eat a bit of the salad and mushrooms, despite the fact that they made me uneasy. Consuming anything, even the air in this world, felt wrong. Like I was breathing in toxic fumes not meant for human consumption. Still, a little bit of the food wouldn't hurt me. At least, that's what I told myself. After eating, we set out for the Archway. The hike was a long one, and David brought plenty of water and provisions, filling up our canteen from a spring along the way. Once again, I felt glad for his guidance. If not for him, I'd probably be dead 10 times by now. After a long while, we reached the clearing where the arch had been. Once again, it wasn't there. The spot where it had been was empty, but he wandered over to it anyways. How can it just disappear, be here one day and gone the next? I asked. David shook his head. "How could any of this be possible? I wouldn't have believed it if someone told me, would you?" I thought about that for a few seconds. No, probably not. I think they were crazy, or high, or maybe both. And yet, here we are, defying all rational common sense. There wasn't much more to say, so we continued walking. I tried desperately to ignore the feeling that I heard the sounds of rustling leaves behind us, as if someone were following quietly and at a distance. Every time I looked back, there was no one there. Eventually, we reached the shiitake patch. David told me to start picking mushrooms quickly before the creatures found us. He said they were smart and would send out scouts. So once they knew where we were, more would be gathered, and they would come back to hunt us like pack animals. The worst part was they knew this was a favorite spot of his, so they would be ready for him. After a few short minutes of gathering mushrooms, David told me to wrap up. "Let's go," he said. "There's no more time." Despite my fear, I couldn't believe what he was saying. We had just started. It had been such a long hike, and a small amount of mushrooms would barely sustain us for a day. "Come on, David, a few more minutes." I said, "Let's go!" He hissed at me, his face morphing into one of rage. I almost didn't recognize him. His color changed, going red, almost purple. And there was something else strange, too. His chest seemed to spasm when he was angry. The fabric puffed in and out in a very strange way, like he was breathing much too fast. He caught me looking at him and calmed down slightly, then came over to me and grabbed my arm, dragging me away from the mushroom patch.
I can see one. It's a little ways away, 6 o'clock. That means there's more. We need to start walking fast. Don't run, don't look. Don't let them know we saw them.
All of this he said while dragging me away from the mushroom patch, and I fought the urge to glance over my shoulder. But I did hear the distinct sound of movement now, coming closer, gaining on us steadily. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my heart pounding faster, my throat dry, my knees shaking.
"Quiet,"
he whispered angrily. I was silent for a few short seconds, and the noises came closer and closer.
"Run!"
he screamed, and I began to bolt as fast as I could through the trees. A second later, I heard them all around us. They had us surrounded. They'd been waiting for us.
"Your gun!"
David screamed from behind me, and I tried to get ready while still running. Then I saw what he was worried about. One of the creatures was straight ahead, waiting for us, partially hidden behind a tree. It revealed itself just barely, poking its head out to look and see how far off we were, then it disappeared again.
"You see it?"
he shouted.
"Yeah. When we get to that tree, you go left, I'll go right. Don't get too close."
I understood immediately what he was doing. He was sacrificing himself for me. By going to the right, he was running right through the eye line of the creature. He would be running right past it within inches of its grasp, all to distract it so it wouldn't get me. Part of me wanted to argue, but there was no time. We were already at the tree. I broke to the left, and David went right. The creature lunged at him just as I'd feared and managed to rake him with its long, talon-like fingernails. His back was bloodied as he ran, getting ahead of me as he put on speed.
"There's more up ahead,"
he yelled, and I saw them a second later. There were at least 2, maybe more, hiding in trees and waiting for us a little ways ahead. I had a feeling they would not be fooled as easily as the last one. Luckily, we had a speed advantage on the creatures, at least the ones we'd come across so far. I hated to think what a faster version of these things would look like. Our ability to outrun them was the only thing keeping us alive. I could hear them chasing after us, their heavy footsteps loud as they crushed the leaves underfoot.
"Let's split up,"
David said.
"You go left, I'll go right. When we meet in the middle, say 100 paces from here, got it?"
Sure, I agreed, not sure what other options we had. I was deferring to him since he seemed to know what he was doing.
"Now!"
he yelled, branching off from our trajectory, heading to the right. At the same time, I went left. The creatures took a moment to respond, but once they saw what we were doing, they left their hiding spot, where they were waiting to ambush us. The creature closest to me came at me from my right, and I screamed as it came within a few feet of me, its horrifying arms reaching out to grab me. I felt the breeze from its hand rushing past, but managed to duck out of the way just in time, stumbling over a fallen log and face-planting right afterwards. The thing crawled after me, and I felt it grab my ankle, pulling me towards it as it screamed. Kicking as hard as I could with my other leg, I brought my foot up into the creature's jaw, where it connected with a sickening crunch. It howled a hurt cry of anger as its grip loosened on my ankle for a split second. I attempted to wrench myself free, but it held on tightly. The thing was so strong. I was about to kick it again when it grabbed my other leg and began to crawl in towards my face. Its oversized eyes widened with anticipation, drool pouring out over its lower lip. The thing was about to eat me. As it unhinged its jaw like a python about to consume a deer, I remembered my rifle slung across my back. The thing darted its head forward towards my neck, as if to start its meal with my jugular. The rifle was caught underneath my body weight. I was trying to rock side to side to pull it free, while simultaneously shoving the thing away from me with my knees, kicking and bucking and doing anything I could to weasel my way out of its grasp. Just as its teeth were about to shut around my windpipe, I managed to free the rifle. Using all of my strength, I pulled my knees back and kicked the creature in its chest, sending it reeling backwards for half an instant. Just enough time for me to get a shot off. The blast echoed through the forest, exploding outwards from the barrel of my rifle. One moment the creature was there in front of me. The next, its head was gone, replaced by a bloody crater jettisoning blood from the ruined remains of the creature's visage. I scrambled to my feet and ran, not looking back. After a long, harrowing run through the forest, I met up with David again. He looked even worse for wear than before. Whereas I had gotten away cleanly, he had been mauled by one of the creatures, just barely escaping with his life. He was bloodied and had gashes on his neck, his forehead, and both of his arms from defensive wounds. And worst of all, he'd lost his gun in the process. And now we were down to only one weapon for defense, and half of the ammo. Eventually we arrived back at the cave, after a long run through the forest, barely escaping with our lives. David was in rough shape, and I helped him lay down on his bedroll. I went outside to find leaves or whatever possible to patch up his wounds in the absence of bandages. I had a small first aid kit with me as well, which I brought everywhere, but it wasn't nearly enough for the injuries he'd sustained. I cleaned his wounds and packed the worst of them with gauze from my first aid kit, then wrapped them up with long leaves from the forest. David began pushing me away when I went to unbutton his shirt to tend to the wounds on his back. I told him to calm down, but he wouldn't stop resisting me. Eventually I relented and told him to deal with the cuts himself. They wouldn't heal properly if he didn't do something about them. But he just closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, the blood running from his wounds, leaking out onto the rock floor of the cavern while he snored. For the second night in a row, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David and his injuries. He would be dead by morning if I didn't do something. There's too much blood loss. I couldn't understand why someone with his level of experience wasn't taking this seriously. Was he delirious? Suddenly his snoring stopped. The cave was dead quiet and still in the darkness of the night. And then I heard a sound like rocks being moved, a shuffling of feet, bones creaking and cracking. There was a wet, sloppy sound, smacking lips and rending flesh. Someone pulling meat from bone and tearing gristle with sharp incisors. I peered into the darkness of the cave, looking in the direction of the sound, and my eyes slowly began to adjust. David was up. He was eating something in the corner of the dark cave. It looked like... Was it moving? Was that a rat? Or a squirrel? He took another bite of flesh from the writhing thing which had been moving in his grasp, and suddenly it was still again, and the only sound was of him chewing. My eyes adjusted further, my heart pounding rapidly. David's shirt was off. He had treated his wounds after all. In the darkness, when I'd been trying to sleep, my eyes closed. He'd been busy dealing with his injuries. And I realized now why he hadn't wanted me to see beneath his clothes. It all made sense suddenly. The twitching beneath his shirt when he got upset. The way his color changed when he was angry. His face had turned red, almost purple like the sky. Beneath his shirt was the most obvious change of all. He took another large bite of whatever it was he'd found scurrying in the cave. And with his 4 quickly moving hands, he pulled flesh from the bones and crammed more of the creature into his mouth. His eyes were golden and reflective when they caught me staring at him in the darkness. And as I got to my feet, I began to run. I stumbled out from the cave, terrified. My legs didn't seem to work properly. Everything around me was wrong. The colors, the shadows, the shapes of the trees, and the sounds of the singing birds sitting in their branches. This world was not my own, and I needed to get out. Now. Running as fast as I could through the forest, I remembered how I had come to be in this place. As a park ranger trainee, I'd been on fire lookout assignment, and had been sent to confront a few campers who had made a bonfire without a permit in an off-limits area. But I had stumbled through a gateway to another world in the process, becoming lost in this strange place. Trapped in another dimension, where humanoid creatures with gray skin and 4 arms hunted people in the purple-tinged darkness. I fell flat on my face, landing hard after tripping over something. A vine? No, whatever it was thin and sharp, and it hurt me badly. The piano wire, or whatever it was, had cut across my shins, and I felt the warmth of blood trickling down from the skin. The traps. I'd forgotten all about the traps David had set all throughout this part of the forest, to keep him safe from the creatures in this terrifying world. "Come back!" I heard David yelling over my shoulder from the darkness. "It's not safe, you must come back!" But I didn't listen. I scrambled back to my feet and began to run. My only thought was to get to the Archway. The place where I'd entered this world, the portal back to Earth, had to be there. It had to be. David's voice could be heard receding into the darkness behind me. I shuddered involuntarily, thinking about how I had seen him in the darkness of the cave, eating something like a rat or a mouse. Not only that, but his arms had been too many. There were an extra pair of hands working at the hairy flesh of the vermin he'd been eating. The bloody fur and the tearing sounds of him ripping chunks from the creature's body with his teeth were too much to think about. At first I thought maybe he was lying to me from the beginning and that he was from this place all along. Maybe he was born here and was trying to keep me trapped in this place. But the more I considered it, the more I realized that idea didn't sit right with me. David was not a denizen of this terrible, violet-tinted world, no. He was from Earth. The way he spoke, talking about Fire Tower 14, which he said he had worked at, proved to me that he was not from here. He was from Earth. My mind began to work out what this meant and came to the conclusion that being in this world changed you over time. Being here, eating the foraged food and breathing the purple-tinged air, all of it was toxic to people from our world, and it caused side effects that were likely permanent. I only hoped I hadn't been here long enough for a change to occur in me. I shuddered at the thought of an extra pair of arms splitting open the flesh of my abdomen and reaching out, grabbing anything they could get their hands on. Hungry, desperate for food, for blood and flesh, and... Fuck. I need to get out of this place. Running through the woods more carefully now, I lifted my feet high off the ground to avoid tripwires, and hoped that I didn't stumble into a spike-filled pit, or some other death trap which David had planted. Before being hired as a fire lookout, David had served in the British military, in the SAS, a highly trained branch similar to the Special Forces in America. He was a deadly shot with a rifle, and I no longer had mine with me. I picked up my pace, hearing the sound of him coming after me through the forest. He was injured, and that would slow him down, but he also knew this place far better than I did. He knew where the traps were located and how to avoid them, whereas I was just hoping to be able to find my way back to the Archway. The possibility of getting lost forever in the wilderness of this strange world occurred to me briefly, but I tried my best not to think about it. Trying to remember the way we traveled through the forest, I stepped tentatively across the ground, no longer running but slowly walking through the trees now. I was terrified of stepping on a spike or tumbling into a pit with spikes at the bottom ready to impale me. David had told me once to never go outside alone, since he had placed traps everywhere in this area. There was a noise close behind me, and I looked back to see David was following me from a distance, gaining on me, and I picked up my pace and began to run again. "Come back," he called after me, his voice sounding different now, distorted and wrong. "It's not safe." Breaking into a sprint, I hoped to lose him in the darkness. And for a time, it seemed to work. He was slower due to his injuries or his mutations and was hobbling when I saw him again, trailing me from a distance now. Confident that I'd managed to escape the section of forest where he was hiding his traps, I began to make my way towards the Archway. There were certain landmarks David had shown me to find my way back to it, but none of them looked quite the same at night. In fact, nothing looked the same at night. I was starting to worry that I'd become completely lost when I finally saw the huge oak tree with its one low branch that pointed the way. Following David's prior advice, I continued traveling in that direction. After a long period of walking, I realized the sun had begun to rise, looking purple and bloated and wrong as it always did in this world. But at least it gave another indication of which direction I should be working towards. And it helped to light the way, making the landmarks more obvious as I came across each one. Here was the babbling brook I would follow for a little while, and there was the strange boulder that looked like a face. I felt a pang of regret at leaving David behind after he'd saved my life, showing me how to survive in this world. But then I shook my head and reconsidered. No, I could not go back to that cave. Maybe he was eating rats now, but what if tomorrow he developed a taste for my flesh? What if I woke up to find him hunched over me, eating my leg or my foot? No. Going back was not an option. If David was still following me, there was no indication of it. I couldn't hear him chasing me anymore, and he wasn't calling after me. Maybe because he was worried about alerting the creatures to his presence. The clearing where the Archway had been was not far now. It was just another 10 minutes or so of walking, and I was just hoping it would be there this time. If it wasn't, I was completely unsure of what I would do. I'd been trying not to think about that part of things, since the idea of the portal not being there was too much to bear. "Come back," someone called out from the woods suddenly, startling me. It was David again. At least it sounded like him. "Isn't safe," another voice called out from my right, sounding sped up, then slowed down, like a tape recorder running low on batteries. Leaves crunched on the ground behind me and ahead of me, and from all angles there were now voices calling out in distorted tones. "Come back. It isn't safe. Come back. It isn't safe." The more they said it, the more the words didn't sound like words anymore, but just strange, alien noises. They mingled together in a echoing cacophony of sounds. My heart began to pound against my sternum like a jackhammer from the inside. My palms were sweating as I tried to lift my legs to run, but realized they wouldn't move. It was at that moment that I observed the fact that I didn't have my rifle, and it dawned on me for the first time that I had left it back at the cave with David. And as that thought went through my mind, the trees and shrubs all around me began to rustle and sway, moving aside to reveal the gray, four-armed figures who had been lying in wait. If you know a particular spot, they'll start to wait for you there. They're adept hunters, and they know exactly how to ambush someone. Trust me, I've seen it for myself, David had told me. Yeah, I thought bitterly. He'd seen it firsthand with the rat in the cave. As he was turning into one of them, he was becoming a pretty good hunter himself. The pack of creatures closed in on me from all angles, and I sucked in a terrified breath, unable to scream or run or do anything at all. It was hopeless. Or so I thought. The blast of the rifle was deafening in the stillness of the forest, and I winced at the sound of it as it took the head off the creature closest to me, which was just about to grab hold of me. "Run!" David screamed from the trees, and this time I could tell very clearly that it was his voice. But at the same time, he looked different. He left his shirt back at the cave, and an extra pair of arms on his abdomen were plainly visible now, and I could see they were holding the rifle. With 4 hands moving rapidly, David reloaded the gun in a fraction of the time, then had the sights up to his eye again and was ready to fire. I did as he asked, trying to pry my eyes away from the horrifying image of what was happening. The creatures were abandoning me to go after a bigger threat, and I saw them stomping through the brush towards him as he fired the gun again, taking off the top of one of their skulls in a bloody spray. A chunk of gray matter landed on my cheek, and I brushed it off in disgust. Getting to my feet, I began to run, but one of the creatures stopped me. The one David had just shot was still alive somehow, and grabbing onto my leg, digging its talon-like claws into the flesh of my ankle, gritting its teeth and staring up at me with a brainless, evil hunger. I screamed and howled in pain, turning away and using my other foot to stomp on the thing's face. As it spit out broken teeth, it smiled at me, squeezing and digging its nails in deeper, until I could feel blood pouring out and soaking through the fabric of my sock. "Come back!" it croaked in David's voice. Finally, I stepped on the thing's arm, wrenching my leg free from its grip. It was like the thing felt no pain at all, as it was immediately trying to come after me again with its other good hands. It was like all it desired was to cause pain, but felt none of its own. Trying not to think about that, I turned away and began to run, limping on my one injured leg, ignoring the pain as I broke into a sprint. And just as I got out of sight from David, I heard him cry out in anguish. His screams cut short as one of the creatures began to chew on his windpipe, and all that could be heard after that was a hushed, gurgling sound far back in the distance, as he drowned on his own blood. Somehow I knew, without even seeing it happen, that David was dead, but I had no time to mourn for him. I rushed through the trees, trying to ignore the pain in my leg, hoping with every fiber of my being that the archway would still be there. I spoke the words in my mind out loud over and over again, like a mantra, as the clearing came closer and drew into focus. Please be there, please be there, please be there. And when I came out from the trees into the clearing, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Was this a dream? A mirage? A fantasy that would disappear when I blinked my eyes and opened them again? No. It was there. It was actually there. The archway was back. And just in the nick of time. Without a moment's hesitation, I ran through it, terrified that it would disappear before I got the chance to step through the threshold and back into my dimension. Like a man terrified of elevators and worried the box will drop out at any second, I leapt through the archway and back into the glorious golden sunlight of our world. I realized immediately what I had been missing, as the blue sky above could be seen through the trees, and I noticed I was truly warm for the first time in days, as if I had been walking in shadow, and only now was stepping out into the sun. As I began to walk back towards the road, I took a nervous look back over my shoulder at the archway, and I froze when I saw the disturbing sight behind me was still there. I could still see the purple sky on the other side, and that could only mean one thing. The portal was still open. Terrified of what that implied, I shuddered and continued walking, looking back every so often for creatures, and hoping that the archway would disappear, this time for good. But it didn't. As I left it behind in the trees and lost sight of it, and my last glimpse showed the evil purple sky shining through from the other side, insidiously waiting for another hiker to stumble through. Or worse, for something else to emerge from the other side. At least if I have to face another one of those creatures, it will be on my turf, I thought to myself with some slight reassurance. But I didn't have a weapon, and I would need backup. I wasn't out of the woods yet. After limping through the forest for 10 or 15 minutes, eventually I found the road. A part of me had been worried it wouldn't be there, that this would just be another world that looked like ours, one of a million different potential places that the Archway could take you to, and that I would find myself wandering through some unknown forest yet again, set upon by some new breed of ravenous creatures with a thirst for blood. But thankfully this did look like my road, and it had been the one I had been on before. I could even see the distinctive tread marks in the mud from what appeared to be the Jeep. Maybe from the day when Ross had dropped me off in this very spot. I felt a twinge of anger at the thought of my supervisor, and decided I would let him have it the moment I saw him. He was supposed to be my backup. I was supposed to be learning from Ross, and instead he'd let me go out on my own. And now look at what had happened. Limping along the shoulder of the gravel road, eventually I saw the fire tower come into view up ahead. It came into focus gradually, emerging from the trees that hid it from my sight. The Jeep was there, and I realized instantly what that meant. It meant that Ross was up there. He wasn't out looking for me like he should have been. But then if he'd been where he was supposed to be, none of this would have ever happened. I climbed the wooden steps leading up to the fire tower, getting more and more enraged as I got further up and closer to the man who I now believed was responsible for all this. My aching leg was bloodied, and I could feel it swelling and my pant leg tightening around it. Finally, I reached the top and threw open the door to find Ross sitting at the table, reading a book, drinking a cup of coffee and looking quite comfortable. He looked surprised to see me and shocked at the sight of me. "Holy shit!" he screamed, almost knocking his coffee cup over. The brown liquid spilled all over the pages of his paperback. "You're back!" "That's right, motherfucker," I hissed, limping towards him. I could feel my face turning hot and red. His eyes widened further. What's wrong with your face? Are you okay? You're turning, purple." I didn't know what to say to that. I looked in the mirror to my left and saw that he was right. I didn't look like myself at all. I looked like a monster, made of rage at that moment, my face purple with anger. Suddenly all of the fight left me, and I realized how utterly exhausted I was. I heaved out a great sigh and crumpled to the floor of the fire tower cabin. I collapsed, unable to understand what was happening to me. I didn't feel like myself at all. And as I was sitting there on the floor, I felt something writhing inside of me. A squirming feeling in my abdomen, like fingers reaching out from inside, trying to poke and tear their way through the skin of my belly. I screamed, pulling up my shirt and clutching my abdomen, feeling the skin for a bulging pair of hands or a face, picturing that scene from the movie Alien. But there was nothing there. No indication of anything growing or mutating inside of me, except a slight tingling there, like fingers gently brushing up against my skin from the inside, tickling me very lightly. "No," I said aloud, still clutching myself tightly. "Dude, where the fuck happened to you?" Ross asked, looking at me with grave concern. "You're gone for 2 days. Now you come back screaming, grabbing at yourself? Your face just went purple as an eggplant. Like you had anaphylactic shock for a few seconds, and now it's back to normal again. Tell me, please, because I am genuinely very fucking concerned. What the hell happened to you out there?" took a few seconds before answering. I didn't honestly know what to say until the words began spilling out of me. Same thing that happened to David, that's what happened to me. There was a delayed reaction as it took several long seconds for him to register the name, but then he did, and his jaw dropped. How? Where did you hear that name? How do you know about David? I met him, I said, and was about to continue when I heard a sound from beneath the fire tower. It sounded like someone coming up the stairs. I shot to my feet, my eyes darting around the room. Where's the rifle? You need your rifle now! Ross didn't know what to make of this at first, and was about to question me, but then the look on my face seemed to convince him. He ran over to the gun rack on the wall and pulled down his rifle. Checking to make sure it was loaded, he took the safety off. Is that David? He asked. I shook my head, no. What the hell did you get us into, exactly? He asked nervously. But before I could respond, there was someone at the door. There was a sound of scratching. Long nails against the wood, scraping it. And there was a distorted gray face at the window, looking in at us. I'm back, it demanded. Ross held the scope up to his eye and got ready to fire at the door. And then the footsteps began to recede, going back down the stairs. What the fuck was that thing? Ross asked, lowering his gun. I tried to gather my thoughts, tried to figure out how to explain it all. Those things, whatever they are, they're deadly, I said. And they're not from this world. They're smart. They're almost impossible to kill. Right now they're getting reinforcements. It looks like they're retreating, but they're assembling a hunting party. How can you possibly know all this? I led him outside and pointed down at them below. They were going back for more of their own kind to bring them into our world. As I looked down from the lofty fire tower, I could see them moving quickly into the forest. Some were going back to the Archway, but not all of them. They were planning on staying here, making this their new home. After all, there was an abundant food supply, and no reason to leave. I tried to sum up what had happened as well as I could in such a short time. It was difficult for him to believe, but the proof had been right in front of us. The monster had been right outside the fire tower, and we'd seen more of them below us. There was no way to fake that. We needed to do something, fast. Okay, assuming you and I haven't lost our minds and just hallucinated whatever that thing was, I'll take your word for all this. So what the hell are we gonna do? My supervisor asked reluctantly. I considered this for a few long moments. How much gas do we have between the generator and the Jeep? I asked. His eyes went wide after he realized why I was asking. For a while he didn't answer, but then he nodded his head and waved for me to follow him. Enough, he said as I followed him down the stairs. There's enough. You might have heard about the wildfire on the news. It was a big one. There was speculation it was caused by hikers or careless campers. But the real reason why the blaze started was never truly discovered. No one would have guessed it was set by 2 rogue park rangers. And fire lookouts, no less. The forest fire spread and took out a lot of homes. But everyone who lived in the area made it out alive. Thankfully, no one died. I don't know how I would have lived with myself if they had. I was fired from the park ranger service after that happened, as was Ross. With all the news coverage and social media outrage, someone had to be blamed for what had happened. And we were the most viable scapegoats, especially since we were the Fire Watch lookouts, and we'd been seen fleeing the area long before the blaze was ever reported. Our excuse was that the fire started near the road, and we had been down by the Jeep when we noticed it. Believing our lives were in danger, we'd fled from the area before our escape route could be cut off, and told our supervisors that we hadn't been able to radio in the report until afterwards. Unfortunately, there's no way of really knowing if we killed those things, or if we destroyed the Archway. Maybe it can't even be destroyed. Maybe those things can't be killed. It's been years since all this happened. I'm terrified of the forest these days. I stay out of the woods, away from nature entirely. I live in a big city, far away from all that business. I work in a high-rise and live in an apartment building. And when people ask if I want to go camping, I say hell no. People tell me I'm strange. They talk about me behind my back. That's okay. One thing that people find peculiar about me is that I never go swimming. I never take my shirt off. And I don't date or try to find a girlfriend, despite people trying to set me up. I don't want anyone to see the changes that have been happening. The arms that have fully sprouted from my abdomen and have a mind of their own. I try to tie them down, to strap them down with duct tape so they can't move. But they always manage to free themselves. They're very crafty in that way. And they brought with them an unusual appetite. I've found myself craving the most disturbing things. Things that crawl and skitter in the subways and in the sewers. Things I have to chase and kill and rip flesh from bones with my bare teeth. It scares me to think about what I'm becoming, and part of me will always be terrified. A voice in my mind screaming that this is wrong. I need to get help. But another part of me is getting used to it. A primordial, alien part of me is starting to very much enjoy the hunt.
Peter? Can you even see anything up there?
Harry, the oldest yet least mature forest ranger, said over the two-way. High on my perch in Tower 3, I had a full 360-degree view of the national forest that stretched out to the horizon. This was a dumb joke he liked to ask every time I drew the short straw for this position. Yeah, vision is clear. No smoke, no fires, no adverse weather conditions.
Cool. Hey, can you see me flipping the double bird to you?
He said this so often that I mouthed the words as he spoke. Harry, like stress or radiation, was fine in small doses. God help you if you have a weekend shift with the man. That's a negative, I said. How's campsite duty?
Slow. There are like 5 campers here, and 2 of them are hosts. Phil That Jack is back as host of the Western Loop. Can't stand that dude.
He's not bad. A little gruff, but once you break through, he's still a little gruff, I said, trying and failing to find something nice to say about Filth Hat Jack.
Gruff like those goats from the fairy tale. Weren't they devils, or sold to the devil, or tricked a devil?
Not up to date with my billy goat folklore.
That's why they put you up in the tower. Meanwhile, the rest of us grounders are thinking about playing poker later.
Ground squirrels, or grounders, was the nickname Harry made up for anyone who's not working in a lookout tower during their shift. It never made sense to me. Squirrels can climb trees, which are nature's towers, but the name stuck. Tower dwellers were named after the high-flying sandhill cranes, which inevitably got shortened to Sandies. You all suck at poker, I said. You have to be able to bluff and lie to win. All the people on grounder duty are basically priests. Now me, I can spin yarns like the best of them.
Hey, Nitnuts, why don't you spin me a yarn about how you lost $100 last time we played? Guys, these two-way radios are for emergencies,
Gwen said, her voice sounding more exasperated than usual. She was another Sandy set up in Tower 5, about 20 miles northwest of me. She had gifted kid vibes, which made sense, as she had been one, and was easily annoyed with the rest of us. But everyone loved her. Deep down, she loved us too. But really deep down. Called John Hammond, we found insects in ancient amber deep.
Gwenny,
Harry said, dragging out her name.
You promised not to play schoolmarm today. George is gone for the week. Let's enjoy a boss-free day.
Gwen sighed.
1, I never promised anything. 2, you know I hate being called Gwenny. And 3, it was a troll in the Three Billy Goats Gruff legend,
she said, before adding,
Oh, and 4, you are the absolute worst poker player in camp, Peter. Boom!
Harry said. I couldn't see him doing his bullhorns hand charging at you move, but I knew he was doing it. This man was in his 50s. He had kids in college.
Everyone knows, bud.
Yeah. Gwen's right. These two ways are for official business only. Sandy 3 out.
Have fun with Filth Hat Jack,
Gwen said.
Sandy 5 out. I'll pray no sudden thunderstorms come rolling in,
Harry said with a laugh.
Grounder 1, over and out, baby. Suck my butt.
Again, this man has a mortgage. When I get tower duty, I always bring a book or two. When you're up in the gentle rocking and quiet of the air, you can get a lot of reading done. I'm currently going through a series of horror movie novelizations. I just finished Alien and The Fog, and was looking forward to The Blob. I wanted to do a run of 40s pulp detective novels next. No, I don't have a girlfriend. Why do you ask? Anyway, after about an hour, my two-way came to life.
Sandy 3, this is Sandy 5. You copy?
Gwen was always so formal. Sandy 3 to Sandy 5. Copy.
Hey, Pete, you get any emergency calls in the last 10 minutes or so?
Negative. What's up?
The cabin's two-way started squawking a bit ago. First it was just static, but then, well, it kind of sounded musical.
Musical? How?
It sounded like a kid's piano playing Mary Had a Little Lamb, I think. It repeated a few times before going silent.
Maybe radio signals bleeding through?
I thought that at first too, but I haven't heard anything since.
Maybe you have a fan out there that really wanted you to hear their rendition of a childhood favorite?
If anyone knows I'm up here, I'm already in trouble. No one is scheduled to come out this way today.
I wouldn't go speaking that out into the wider world, Gwen.
Not alone. Pearl is here with me. We're attached to the hip, you know.
Pearl was what she called her pistol. All of us carried something when we went out into the wild. In my civilian life, I'm not much of a gun guy. Out here, though, I understand that it's an important tool in my tool bag. Don't want to be cornered by a wild cat and not have anything to scare it away. Pearl is a straight shooter, after all.
The best. Let me know if you hear anything, huh? My intuition is pecking at me.
Roger. If it comes back, try to record some of it on your phone.
Shit. That's a smart idea.
Sometimes we non-gifted Sandys stumble into one.
I regret telling you that all the flippin' time, Pete. Sandy 5 out.
Sandy 3, over and out. I hung up the microphone and walked over to the north-facing window. If the weather is clear, I can sometimes make out Tower 5 from here. It takes a minute to spot, but I always can because, as the old saying goes, there are no straight lines in nature. While not technically true, it's mostly true, and a useful guide for spotters. The difference between Mother Nature and her wayward child, mankind. I scanned the horizon for anything out of the ordinary, but everything looked serene. This view never changes, but it also never disappoints. The number of hours I've sat out on the catwalk just staring out at the natural world would astound you. To work as a ranger, you need to have not just a healthy fear and appreciation for the wild, but genuinely love it. I heard electronic squelches behind me and turned to see some of the lights on the cabin's two-way lighting up. I walked back over, picked up the handle, and spoke. "Sandy 3, come back?" Static broke through the speakers, but that was it. No words, no childhood songs, nothing but grating static. I waited a bit to see if anyone would respond, but after 2 minutes of staring at a speaker, I determined it was nothing. I kicked back in my chair and dove back into my paperback. 2 pages later, Gwen came back.
"Sandy 3, this is Sandy 5.
I groaned as I sat back up and grabbed the microphone. "Go for Sandy 3.
"Peter? Do you see something in the sky? Northwest."
Trailing the long, coiled cord behind me, I walked to the window and looked in the direction she told me. I held my hand over my eyes to shield any glare, but still didn't see anything. I pressed the button. "Negative. Can't see anything. What is it?"
"I don't know. I was knitting and I heard something whoosh over the tower. You know, sometimes small planes zip closer than they should. But when I looked out, I didn't see anything. At first. Then, about 10 miles or so out, the sun reflected off something silver in the sky."
"Chopper? Sometimes the fire guys do test runs on clear days."
"Nothing on the schedule. I tried raising them on the radio, but no one responded."
That wasn't ideal. You want the fire brigade to answer a call. That goes double if you're surrounded by living firewood. A spark could start an inferno that would eat through an entire forest at a speed that would make your head spin. "Want me to try to hail them?"
"Yes."
she said. Her usually firm voice wavered a little.
"Pete, this thing is just hovering in the sky."
Sometimes they'll do a training run without informing us. It's rare, but it happens. That has to be it. Has to be.
"Has to be."
She echoed. "Give me a second. Let me switch frequencies and I'll call. I'll come right back. Sandy 5 out." I gave the sky another glance, but didn't see anything hovering. I knew Gwen. She was as straight a shooter as Pearl. She said she saw something. She saw it. I flipped over to the fire emergency frequency and depressed the button. "This is National Forest Lookout Tower 5. Does anyone copy?" Silence. I tried again. And again. Nothing. I flipped to a few more frequencies and didn't get a reply. It was like they were ignoring us. I switched back to Gwen and filled her in. She wasn't happy.
"What the hell? What's going on? What if there's a fire?"
Is the thing still in the sky?
"Yep. Not moving. Feels like I'm being watched."
What's the bearing on your Osborne? The Osborne is a fire detecting tool equipped within every cabin. It's used to determine a location relative to the tower. It swivels 360 degrees and has an accurate topographical map at its center. When you sight smoke, you line up the crosshairs to find the degrees along the side. It's accurate enough with one tower, but more so if other towers can center in and cross-reference each other.
329 degrees and 48 minutes.
Gwen said.
Let me know what you see.
I moved the Osborne to the bearing and took a gander through the crosshairs. My eyes are trained to follow the ridges, so it took a second for me to adjust to the sky. At first, I didn't see anything with my naked eye. Then I did notice the sun glint off of something. Oh, Gwen, I see it. Barely, but there's something there.
So I'm not crazy?
Well, that remains to be seen. But with this, you're good.
I don't like that I can't get through to fire and rescue. That's never happened before.
Try your cell? Maybe you can reach them that way.
I tried. No signal. I usually have a few bars out here, but not now.
Always when you need it the most, right?
No kidding. Oh, shit. Pete, this thing's dropping.
Falling or landing?
Both? It's a quick, controlled descent. You see it?
I didn't. I'd barely seen it in the air. If it was quickly falling out of the sky, I had no chance of seeing a thing. Negative.
Shit. It just dipped below the tree line. I'm filling out a smoke report. I don't know what else to do except follow protocol.
Let me try to give him a call on my phone. I had a signal earlier. Hold on. I pulled my phone out, ready to dial, but noticed I didn't have any service. It wasn't even roaming. Just blank, like cell towers had been erased. I tried restarting my phone, but it didn't change anything. I don't have service either, I said into the two-way. Any changes over there? I heard Gwen hit the button to speak, but she didn't say a word. Instead, I listened to her handheld two-way radio click several times, and sure enough, the beginning of Mary Had a Little Lamb started playing. Finally, she whispered,
Are you hearing this?
I am. The song suddenly stopped, and a calm, almost robotic voice started to speak. Gwen and I stayed quiet as churchgoers as the voice said,
777, Alpha, Omega, 6. Unknown, unknown, unknown. Repeat. 777, Alpha, Omega, 6. Unknown, unknown, unknown.
The voice stopped, and my heart did as well. Seconds later, the tinny version of Mary Had a Little Lamb started playing again.
What is that? Who's sending that out?
It sounds like a code. Like from a number station?
Number station? As in, secret messages to spies number stations?
Spies or government officials, maybe. I'm just guessing. It could be someone's idea of a weird prank. Maybe it's the fire and rescue teams just messing with us.
I dated a guy in fire and rescue,
Gwen said.
They don't have an ounce of sense of humor shared among them. I think this is legit. And I think it's bad. Sounds like a warning. And I don't think it's a coincidence that came right after this thing showed up and landed.
Gwen, we don't know what's going on. I think writing the report is a good idea. Want me to relay a message to the campsites? Get another ranger out there? Maybe you'll get lucky and Harry will be dispatched, I said, trying to lower the tension. Gwen may have sounded calm to the untrained ear, but I knew she was scared. Or, at the very least, unnerved. I was as well, but didn't want to share that. She laughed, but it sounded like it was Texas two-stepping with crying.
Do you know what he told me the other day? That he thought, if given 6 months of training, he could make the Pro Bowler tour. With nothing but alley balls.
Maybe we should encourage it and give our ears a break.
Actually, he said, I could throw cheese like a pissed-off Wisconsinite, Gwenny.
She said, imitating his voice. That man has kids in college, Gwen, I said.
That man watched 9/11 as it happened,
she said. Oh, that's a good one. Our conversation was cut short when we both heard a low rumble and felt a slow, rolling earthquake shake our towers. I grabbed onto my table as the entire cabin rocked back and forth like a ship hit by a rogue wave. After what felt like 10 hours, but was actually just 30 seconds, the shaking stopped. Gwen, you okay?
Jesus Christ. I think I heard something in the tower snap.
What?
I don't know. I was worried this whole thing was going to fall over. Was that an earthquake?
Felt like it.
When the hell has there ever been an earthquake here?
I made a mental note to look up if this area ever had a recorded earthquake, and I noticed the trees about a mile out violently snap back and forth in a concentric circle, like someone had dropped a pebble in water. The ring of shaking trees quickly spread out, and I felt the concussive wave before I heard it. Again, the tower shuddered from the blast. The northern window shattered, and bits of glass came flying inward. I ducked under the desk with the cabin two-way to avoid Swiss cheesing my body. Once the blast passed, I shot up and turned to the southern window. You could physically see the concussive wave working its way through the trees toward the campsites. Gwen? You okay? No response. Gwen, please come back. Over. Nothing. Panic started to set in. If she were near the epicenter of that blast, there was a good chance her tower would have collapsed. She could be hurt, or... well, I didn't want to think about that. I tried a third time with no response. My personal two-way squawked. It was Harry calling. He sounded equally nervous and confused.
Sandy 3? This is Grounder 1. What the fuck was that?
I don't know.
You safe?
I think so, but I can't get a hold of Gwen.
Oh, shit. Did you see anything? Any smoke?
She saw something hovering in the sky that went down near a tower. I tried reaching out to fire and rescue, but they didn't respond.
Something was hovering in the sky? Did I hear that right?
Affirmative. It went down or landed. We also heard an odd... The cabin's two-way started to chirp. I turned up the speakers and heard clicking and growling. At first, it sounded random, but then I realized multiple things were clicking and growling. It was as if they were communicating with each other. Then there was a loud, high-pitched electronic squeal that made me slam my hands over my ears. It went on for 10 seconds, and I heard the rest of the glass in the cabin window crack but not fall. When it stopped, I uncovered my ears, but that still didn't chase away the cobwebs. It sounded like my head had been underwater. My ears were swimming. I shook my head and used my thumb to pump at the opening in my ear to help pop them. I heard Harry yelling into my personal two-way, jabbering, and I had a hard time making out what he was saying. I took a second, centered myself, and listened.
Jesus, Peter, can you hear me?
Copy.
Christ on a bike. What took you so long to respond?
I heard something on the cabin two-way. It sounded like someone clicking, or what I imagine crickets would sound like if they could talk.
Crickets talking? Son, did you hit your head?
The cabin's two-way speaker came back to life. More clicking. But this was deliberate, as if it was signaling to someone. It sounded familiar, and I had no idea how that was even possible. At first, I couldn't make out what it was, but then it dawned on me. It was parroting back, "Mary Had a Little Lamb." The fuck? I said, staring at the speaker. I glared at the little box, wishing it would transform into a TV screen and show me what was making that noise. That's when I saw the object rise above the tree line and climb up into the blue sky. It waited a beat and then zipped toward me. "Oh shit," I said, diving under the desk. At speeds I didn't think possible, the craft whooshed over the tower, making it rattle to the foundations. Harry was going nuts over my two-way, rambling about something, but I didn't pay it any attention. Instead, I ran out to my catwalk to see where this craft had gone to, if that was still even possible. As fast as it was traveling, it might be halfway around the world by now. As soon as I pushed open the door to the catwalk, the air around me felt heavy. It even made my movement slow, like Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. I wondered if hopping would make me move quicker. I glanced up, and everything in my vision was wavy, like when you see gas fumes in the daylight. There was nothing above me that I could see, but I knew it was there. That meant it would have to stop on a dime to be here. Nothing I knew could do that. From inside the cabin, the speaker started bleeding out feedback. At first, it was just noise, but it morphed into something I'd been hearing all day. Mary had a little lamb. It made me realize that it was mirroring the message it must have heard at the same time Gwen and I had. In an instant, the song stopped, and the air around me returned to normal. Whatever had been lingering around was gone. Harry was calling out from my personal two-way. I ran back inside and picked it up.
Peter, do you copy?
Copy, I said.
Jesus, what's happening out there?
Before I could answer, my eyes flicked towards the north window, and I saw a thin ribbon of smoke on the horizon. It looked dangerously close to Gwen's tower. I felt my heart start to race. Harry, there's smoke near Tower 5. I can't raise Gwen or fire and rescue.
Shit. Say no more. I'll grab the UTV and head out. You have a bearing on the Osborne for me?
I glanced up to where I'd seen that curl of smoke, but an entire bolt of smoke had replaced the ribbon. Or, honestly, more like a thick pea soup fog that stretched out for about a mile and was still going. No fire spreads that quickly. It reminded me of those snake fireworks that always underwhelmed you as a kid. You light a small black circle, and as it ignites, it expands. At best, it coiled, until it became a puff of nothing and blew away in the breeze. At worst, it stopped coiling after about 10 seconds and left a burn mark on your driveway. I had no idea what was going on here. Jesus, Harry. I don't know what this is, but I'm not sure it's a fire.
Where is it?
Across the horizon, I said, and growing.
What?
The cabin's two-way came to life. Through the speaker, we heard a pre-recorded message from the Secretary of Agriculture, the person who oversees all the national forests. In a calm, measured tone, they said,
Rangers, this is a code black warning. Please remain in place and do not interfere with any military officials who may arrive on scene. If there are civilians present, please inform them that they are to remain in place and cannot leave. Anyone found fleeing this location will be considered hostile and subject to severe punishments. Repeat, this is a code black warning. Stay in place, but do not interfere with any military officials. Thank you for your cooperation.
It came and went like a mid-afternoon storm. I wasn't sure what the smoke or fog was, but I was certain it wasn't just a quickly spreading forest fire. This was something different. Gas attack? A small-scale nuclear device? Dimensional rift? My mind was racing. Harry? What the fuck is a code black?
I have no idea.
Why would they send out the military?
Whatever the reason, it ain't good. Kid, I gotta get out to Gwen. If she's at the epicenter of this, who knows if she's still...
He didn't finish, but we both knew what he meant. I thought nothing but that since she stopped responding. Yeah, go. Be safe, Harry.
You know me. Safety is my middle name. Harry Rupert Safety Big Dong Hill,
he said, trying to add some levity to a tense situation. I gave Harry shit, but that was his true value. He cared about our well-being. I appreciated the attempt, but we were both too scattered to laugh.
Rounder one out.
I walked back out to the catwalk and stared out at the approaching fog. It was so thick that, as it slowly advanced, the trees would just disappear from view. I thought about Gwen, and my guts twisted into pretzels. I had been concerned that the tower collapsed earlier, but now? That seemed quaint. Was she still alive? Had whatever the code black warning entailed harmed her? The pace at which the fog was approaching was increasing. I'd reluctantly have answers to those questions before long. I swallowed hard and ran my hands through my sweaty hair. I wanted to do something to help, but had no idea what I could even do. Would the military arrive soon? Would I be pressed into service? The cabin's two-way started squawking again. Then I heard a familiar voice whisper through the speaker.
Sandy 3. This is Sandy 5. You copy?
Gwen? I ran back inside and nearly ripped the two-way off the wall by yanking on the microphone. Gwen! Gwen! Are you okay? What's going on?
Peter? I can't say much. You may hear me.
Who?
The creatures in the fog.
I fell back down on the ground. I had a hard time breathing. The what?
There are dozens of them. They're multiplying. Shh. Don't speak.
She whispered.
I hear some at the base of the tower.
I held my breath, praying she had closed and locked the access to the catwalk. If they went up into the tower, Gwen had nowhere to go. My heart raced and I felt like I might pass out. I drummed on the floor, praying I'd hear Gwen's voice again.
They haven't figured out I'm in here yet.
She whispered.
So far, they've stayed out of the tower.
I wanted to respond, but I knew my voice coming out of her speaker would be a beacon that led to her. I stayed quiet. She had kept her finger depressed on the microphone button, and I could hear everything going on in her cabin. I wasn't sure if she had accidentally held it down, or if she wanted a record of what happened to her. I heard Gwen's heavy breathing and the occasional rustling of her clothes. I imagined she was tucked under the desk, the long cord trailing from the wall. Sweat beaded on my forehead and poured down my face. Seconds later, I heard something that chilled me. It was the clicking and growling noises I had heard earlier. There were dozens of different ones in the distance. These things had surrounded the tower.
Jesus, I think I hear one on the stairs.
Lock the catwalk door, Gwen. Please tell me you locked the catwalk door, I said to myself. As long as she had the microphone in her death grip, none of my messages would reach her. She was smart, and I was hoping she did the smart thing.
Peter, I don't know what's gonna happen, but thank you for always being nice to me. Tell Harry the same. Dumb jokes and all. But between you and me, the man has personal knowledge of the country's mood during the 2008 housing crisis.
Tears formed at the corners of my eyes, but I smiled. Good one, Gwen.
I'm not saying this is goodbye. I still have Pearl with me. But just in case, there are more of them on the stairs now,
she said, her voice lowering to the point where it was barely audible.
I'm scared, Peter. I don't think these things are from...
The radio cut off. No noise, no static, no connection with her two-way. I pressed the button and whispered, Gwen? Gwen, Can you hear me? Silence. The cabin's two-way shorted out and died. I ran to my personal two-way, but I knew I didn't have the range with it. She was alone, cut off from all humanity. I bolted up and ran to the catwalk. The curtain of fog was inching closer. I thought about Harry, driving like a madman towards it with reckless abandon. He needed to turn back, but there was no way to reach him now. My heart ached. That man had a family. With nothing to do but prepare for the approaching wave, I locked the catwalk and moved the sparse furniture towards the open windows. Not to stop them from coming, but to slow them down in the hopes that the military might have a plan. I pulled out my handgun, loaded it, and watched the fog roll toward me. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if any of us will get out of this alive. I don't know if this can even be stopped. I turned to the southern approach, miles from the darkening fog, and admired the landscape. It really is pretty up here.
Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.